Hey, tonight we're going to travel back to one of the most difficult and defining times in American history. We'll step into the worn-out boots of a Civil War soldier and experience what daily life was really like for the men who fought in the bloodiest conflict ever to take place on American soil. If you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now, find a cozy spot, take a slow, deep breath and let your body sink into comfort as we journey back in time together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1862. The soft morning light filters through a canvas tent that smells of musty earth and wood smoke. Your joints ache from sleeping on the hard ground, and the thin wool blanket that covered you during the night is damp with dew. The good news is you're alive for another day. The bad news is you've got another long march ahead, with your regiment heading toward a rumoured battle that everyone's been talking about for days. You're just 19 years old and about 6 months into your service with the Union Army. Last year, when President Lincoln called for volunteers to serve for 90 days, it had seemed like an adventure, a brief and glorious opportunity to serve your country before returning home a hero. But the 90 days came and went, and the war dragged on. Now you're committed to 3 years of service, and the romantic notions you once had about war have long since faded away. Your mouth is dry and your stomach rumbles. Reaching under your bedroll, you pull out a small tin cup and a canteen. The water inside the canteen sloshes, about half full. You take a small, careful sip, just enough to wet your mouth. Who knows when you'll be able to refill it? Water's precious on a march, and you've already seen men drop from heat exhaustion when their canteens ran dry. Outside your tent, the camp is coming alive. The heavy smell of smoke and coffee fills the air, making your empty stomach growl even louder. You can hear your tent mate, Samuel, stirring beside you. He's older, maybe 24, and from a farm in Pennsylvania. His breathing has a slight wheeze to it. He's been fighting a cough for weeks, but like everyone else, he keeps marching. What choice does he have? "Mornin'," Samuel mumbles, his voice rough with sleep. "Think they'll feed us proper today?" You both know the answer. Proper food is a distant memory from home. The army rations, when they arrive on time, consist mainly of hardtack, a flour and water biscuits so tough it could break your teeth if you don't soak it first. Sometimes there's salt pork that's more salt than pork, and coffee if you're lucky. The coffee is the real treasure. Many soldiers would trade their tobacco or even part of their food ration for a cup of the bitter brew. You slip your feet into your boots, wincing at the dampness inside. Your socks never seem to dry completely, and you can feel the beginnings of a blister forming on your right heel. But complaining won't help. Everyone's in the same condition, or worse. At least you still have boots. You've seen men marching with rags wrapped around their feet after their shoes fell apart. "Just be glad we ain't the Rebs," Samuel says, as if reading your thoughts. "Heard they're living on cornbread and anything they can steal." Outside, a bugle sounds, signaling the official start of the day. You and Samuel quickly roll up your blankets and dismantle the small tent. Everything you own must fit in your knapsack or be carried on your person. The efficiency of your morning routine comes from months of practice. A far cry from your first weeks as a soldier when every task seemed overwhelming. The weight of your equipment is something you've grown accustomed to, though your shoulders still ache by day's end. Your Springfield rifle musket alone weighs nearly 10 pounds. Add to that your cartridge box with 40 rounds of ammunition, a bayonet, canteen, haversack for food, a blanket, personal items, and sometimes a portion of the shared equipment like cooking tools or the tent, and you're carrying close to 40 pounds. You join the line of men gathering around the company cook fires. The company cooks, soldiers selected for the duty, are doling out coffee in tin cups and hardtack from barrels. You take your ration gratefully, dunking the rock-hard biscuit into the black coffee to soften it. The first bite reveals tiny black specks moving in the soaked hardtack, weevils. You've learned to ignore them. Protein is protein, as the veterans joke, and picking them out is a waste of precious eating time. Mail came in last night, says a freckle-faced private named Jenkins. Wilson's got letters. This news sends a ripple of excitement through the men. Letters from home are more valuable than gold out here. They're the thin threads connecting you to the world you left behind. To people who still remember you as more than just another blue uniform in an endless line of marching men. You finish your coffee quickly, hand back the tin cup, and join the small crowd gathering around Wilson, the company clerk who handles the mail. He's calling out names, and each time a letter is claimed, you see a momentary flash of joy on a dirt-streaked face. You wait, hoping, but your name isn't called. It's been 3 weeks since you've heard from home. You tell yourself the letter is just delayed, not lost. The mail system is unreliable at best. Samuel gets a letter from his wife, judging by how he carefully tucks it inside his jacket without opening it. He'll save it for tonight to read privately by firelight. Some things are too precious to share, even among men who sleep side by side and face death together. Form up! Form up! The sergeant's voice cuts through the morning chatter. We move out in 10 minutes. The camp erupts into organised chaos as hundreds of men gather their belongings and form into companies. Your company, Company K, consists of about 80 men, down from the 100 who started when you enlisted. Disease has claimed more than combat so far, with measles, dysentery and typhoid fever sweeping through the camps with ruthless efficiency. You take your place in line, standing shoulder to shoulder with men you now know better than your own brothers. There's Jenkins with his freckles and endless supply of jokes. Thompson, the former schoolteacher who carries a small copy of Shakespeare's sonnets. Monroe, who barely speaks but can play any tune on his harmonica. And of course, Samuel, your tent mate, who joined up, leaving a wife and 2 small children behind. The drum begins its steady beat, and the long column of soldiers starts to move. Left foot, right foot, the rhythm of the march becomes the rhythm of your existence. You've learned to empty your mind during these endless marches, to find a place inside yourself where time stretches and contracts, where you can be both present in your aching body and somehow separate from it. The late summer sun rises higher, beating down on your blue wool uniform. Sweat trickles down your back and your wool shirt sticks to your skin. The inside of your thighs chafe painfully where the rough fabric of your trousers rubs with each step. These are the miseries no one told you about when you enlisted. Not the grand heroics of battle, but the constant grinding discomfort of a soldier's daily existence. Water discipline. the sergeant calls out as you pass a small creek. No stopping yet, though every man in the column eyes the sparkling water with longing. The officers don't want to break the marching rhythm for individual water stops. When you do stop, it will be organized with designated men filling canteens for their comrades to prevent the chaos that could occur if hundreds of thirsty soldiers rushed a water source at once. The road stretches ahead, dusty and seemingly endless. The men at the front of the column kick up dirt that settles on those behind, coating everyone and everything in a fine, gritty layer. Your mouth tastes of dust and your eyes sting. Still, you march on, left foot, right foot. By midday, the column halts for a brief rest. You sink to the ground at the side of the road, grateful for the chance to take the weight off your blistered feet. Samuel sits beside you, finally opening his letter. His face, weathered beyond his years, softens as he reads his wife's words. For a moment, he's not a soldier, but a husband, a father, a man with a life beyond this endless march. She says the corn's coming in good this year, he tells you, a smile breaking through the dust on his face. And little Mary took her first steps. The pride in his voice is palpable, but there's sadness too. A first step is something you can't get back, a moment forever lost to him. You nod, trying to share in his joy while fighting back your own homesickness. The farm in Ohio seems a lifetime away now, though it's been less than a year. You wonder how the apple trees are doing, if your mother still sets a place for you at dinner, if the girl from the neighbouring farm ever reads the awkward letter you sent before marching off to war. The rest is short, 20 minutes at most, before the drums beat again and the sergeants call for formation. You help Samuel to his feet, noticing how his cough has worsened since morning. He waves off your concern. Just dust, he insists, though you both know it's more than that. The army doctors have little to offer for such ailments, perhaps a dose of blue mass pills that contain mercury and often make the patient worse, or a shot of whiskey to ease the discomfort temporarily. Many men prefer to suffer in silence rather than risk the cures. The afternoon march is harder than the morning. The novelty of movement has worn off, replaced by the grinding reality of sore muscles and blistered feet. The weight of your pack seems to increase with each mile. Your rifle, once a point of pride, has become just another burden. You march through small towns where civilians watch from windows and porches. Some wave or offer water, others turn away. This is Union territory, but sympathies are divided. You've seen the sidelong glances, heard the muttered comments. Not everyone believes in the cause you're fighting for, and sometimes that's harder to bear than the physical hardships. By late afternoon, rumours filter back through the column. You're stopping early today. The area ahead has good water and defensible ground. The officers anticipate reaching the battlefield within 2 days and want the men rested. This news brings both relief and apprehension. Rest is desperately needed, but it also means you're drawing closer to combat. When the order finally comes to make camp, there's an audible sigh of relief from the men. The regiment flows off the road into adjacent fields, companies directed to their designated areas by mounted officers. The routine is well established now. First, secure the area and set up defensive positions if needed. Then establish cook fires, pitch tents, and only then can men see to their personal comfort. You and Samuel work together to set up your small shelter tent, really just 2 pieces of canvas buttoned together and stretched over a horizontal pole open at both ends. It's barely large enough for 2 men to sleep under and offers minimal protection from rain, but it's better than sleeping in the open. The camp comes alive around you. Fires are built and soon the smell of cooking fills the air. Today there's a surprise. Fresh beef has arrived with the supply wagons. It's a welcome change from salt pork and hardtack. Men line up with their tin plates, faces expectant. The portion you receive is small, tough, and badly cooked, but it's still the best meal you've had in weeks. As evening falls, the mood in the camp shifts. Men gather in small groups, talking quietly, writing letters by firelight or engaging in impromptu entertainment. Thompson recites Shakespeare to an appreciative audience. Monroe plays his harmonica, the mournful notes of Home, Sweet Home, bringing unexpected tears to your eyes. Some men play cards or dice, gambling for trivial stakes, a button, an extra coffee ration, the promise of a future favor. You sit by a small fire with Samuel and Jenkins, listening to the sounds of the camp settling for the night. In the distance, pickets, sentries watch for any sign of enemy movement, though you're still considered to be in friendly territory. The war feels both imminent and somehow distant in these quiet moments. My pa fought the British in 1812, Jenkins says, poking at the fire with a stick. Said the waiting was always worse than the fighting. Said once the shooting started, you didn't have time to be scared. Samuel nods thoughtfully. My granddaddy told stories about the revolution. Said men would soil themselves before battle, but stand firm once it began. He pauses, coughing deeply before continuing. Guess some things don't change. You've experienced this already, the cramping guts and dry mouth as you waited for your first battle to begin, then the strange, detached calm that came once you were in the thick of it. Not bravery exactly, but a narrowing of focus to the immediate tasks. Load, aim, fire. Load, aim, fire. As if your body continued on its own while your mind retreated to some safer place. They say this one's going to be big, Jenkins says quietly. Whole rebel army's supposed to be up ahead. No one responds. What is there to say? You'll march where ordered, fight when commanded, and hope to survive. Individual choice feels like a distant concept from another life. As darkness deepens, the camp grows quieter. The day's exhaustion catches up with everyone, and men retreat to their tents or simply wrap themselves in blankets beside dying fires. You and Samuel crawl into your small tent, arranging yourselves in the familiar pattern. Heads at opposite ends, to give each other slightly more room. You use your knapsack as a pillow, the hard edges digging into your cheek. Above you, through the open end of the tent, stars are visible in the clear night sky. The same stars shine over Ohio, over your family's farm. The thought brings both comfort and a sharp pang of longing. Samuel's breathing has the rattle of developing pneumonia. You've heard it before in other men, know what it likely means if left untreated. But what can you do? The regimental surgeon has hundreds of men to care for, and a cough isn't priority, not with a battle looming. If anything happens to me, Samuel says suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper, would you make sure my wife gets my things, and my pay if they ever give it to us? The question hangs in the darkness. It's not the first time you've had this conversation. Most men in the company have made similar pacts, a brotherhood of grim insurance policies against the uncertainty of war. Course I will, you answer, but nothing's going to happen. We'll see this through, get back home. Samuel doesn't respond, but his hand briefly clasps your ankle in silent thanks. It's as much physical affection as men usually show one another, but in the context of your shared hardships, it speaks volumes. Sleep comes in fits and starts. The ground is hard beneath your thin blankets and the night air grows chilly. Around you, the camp never fully quiets. Men cough, mutter in their sleep, or rise to answer nature's call. Somewhere nearby, a soldier cries out from a nightmare before being gently hushed by his comrades. No one mocks these nocturnal terrors. You've all had them. You drift between wakefulness and uneasy dreams. In one moment, you're back home helping with the harvest. In the next, you're in the midst of battle, unable to reload your rifle as the enemy advances. The boundary between dream and memory blurs. Was it last month, or in a dream, that you saw a man's face disappear in a spray of red mist? Did you really see a soldier crying over the body of his brother after Shiloh, or have you just heard the story so many times it feels like your own memory? You wake fully before dawn, your body now trained to the military schedule. Samuel is already awake, sitting at the tent opening, shoulders hunched as he tries to suppress his cough. He offers a weak smile when he notices you watching. "Another day," he says simply. "Another day of marching. Another day closer to battle. Another day of being a small, anonymous part of this vast and terrible machinery of war, but also another day alive with the fragile hope of someday returning home." You nod and begin the process of preparing for the day ahead. There's a strange comfort in the routine, the familiar weight of your equipment, the predictable tasks, the camaraderie of shared hardship. This is your life now, for better or worse. You are a Union soldier in the summer of 1862. One blue uniform among thousands, marching toward a destiny you can neither predict nor control. As the first hint of dawn lightens the eastern sky, the bugles sound. Another day begins. You feel the deep ache in your shoulders as you hoist your pack, the familiar weight of your rifle in your hands. Around you, the regiment stirs to life, a massive organism of which you are but a single cell. Left foot, right foot. The march continues, and you with it, step by step into history. The air is thick with early morning mist as you join the company formation, the fog swirling around your ankles like ghostly hands. You find your place in line, nodding to Jenkins on your left and Thompson on your right. Samuel stands behind you, his breathing audible even amid the shuffle of hundreds of men taking position. Forward march. The command ripples down the line and the great human centipede lurches into motion. Today's march will be longer, the officers have warned, 15 miles at least, to position the regiment closer to where intelligence suggests the Confederate forces are gathering. The first hour passes in relative quiet, each man lost in his own thoughts, conserving energy for the long day ahead. The mist burns away as the sun climbs, revealing a landscape of rolling farmland interspersed with patches of forest. It's beautiful country, fertile and green. Hard to believe men will soon be killing each other across these peaceful fields. You feel a tap on your shoulder and turn slightly to see Samuel extending a small piece of hardtack. You shake your head. He needs it more than you, but he insists. You accept the offering, understanding it for what it is, not just food, but a token of brotherhood. Out here, such small kindnesses can mean the difference between despair and endurance. The column passes a small farmhouse where a woman and 3 children stand watching. The youngest, a girl no more than 4, waves shyly. You wave back, a lump forming in your throat. She reminds you of your little sister, though your sister would be older now. Time passes differently when you're away at war, as if your home exists in another world where clocks run at a different speed. By midday, the temperature has risen dramatically. The wool uniform that offered welcome warmth at dawn now feels like an instrument of torture, trapping heat against your skin. Sweat pours down your face, stinging your eyes and soaking your collar. Your canteen is half empty already, and water is becoming a constant preoccupation. During a brief rest halt, rumors sweep through the ranks. Scouts have reported Confederate cavalry just 5 miles ahead. The enemy main force is entrenched near a river crossing you'll reach by tomorrow. Artillery fire has been heard in the distance. Each rumor contradicts the last, and veterans know to treat them all with skepticism. The first casualty of war is truth, Thompson quotes quietly, though you're not sure if it's Shakespeare or his own observation. The afternoon brings new hardships. The road narrows and turns muddy where it passes through a swampy area. Each step becomes a struggle as your boots sink ankle-deep in the muck. Men curse as they stumble or lose shoes to the hungry mud. The column stretches out, losing its cohesion as stronger men outpace those who struggle. Keep it tight. Close it up. The sergeants move up and down the line, cajoling, threatening, occasionally helping the weakest men. Unity is survival, a lesson drilled into every soldier from his first day of training. By late afternoon, exhaustion has become your primary reality. Your world has narrowed to the few feet of muddy road before you and the endless command to place one foot in front of the other. Your shoulders scream from the weight of your pack. The rifle that once felt like a natural extension of your arm now seems made of solid lead. And yet, you march on, because everyone else is marching. Because there is nowhere else to go, because to fall behind is to be left behind, and men left behind sometimes don't catch up at all. They're found days later, robbed and killed by bushwhackers, or simply vanished into the hungry landscape of war. Samuel's cough has worsened with the day's exertion. Each hacking spasm doubles him over, yet somehow he keeps pace. You've offered to carry some of his gear, but pride won't let him accept. Instead, you silently position yourself to catch him if he falls, a contingency neither of you acknowledges aloud. Just as the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the road, the column comes to an unexpected halt. Word passes back. The scouts have located a Confederate patrol less than a mile ahead. The regiment is deploying into defensive positions for the night, preparing for possible contact by morning. There's a new urgency in the officers' commands as companies are directed off the road into adjacent fields and woodlots. Your company is assigned to picket duty at the edge of a small forest, watching the approach from the north. It means no proper camp tonight, no fires, and heightened vigilance until dawn. You and Samuel find a position behind a fallen log that offers some concealment and protection. Neither of you speaks of the possibility of combat tomorrow. Instead, you share the last of your hardtack and a precious sip of water, then check your weapons with practiced hands. Your Springfield rifle is loaded with a mini-A ball, a deadly conical bullet that expands on impact, creating devastating wounds. You touch the percussion cap that will ignite the powder when you pull the trigger, ensuring it's properly seated. Night falls completely, bringing a profound darkness broken only by the faint light of stars. No moon tonight, good for concealment, bad for seeing approaching enemies. The forest around you comes alive with nocturnal sounds, the rustle of small animals, the call of a distant owl, the whisper of wind through leaves. Every sound makes you tense, your senses heightened by the knowledge that danger may be near. Time stretches in the darkness. You're assigned the first watch while Samuel tries to rest, though his coughing makes real sleep impossible. You strain your eyes into the blackness beyond your position, seeing shapes move that aren't really there. The mind plays tricks in such situations, conjuring enemies from shadows. "Do you ever wonder what they're thinking?" Samuel whispers during a quiet moment. "The Rebs, I mean. Do you think they're sitting in the dark just like us, missing home and wondering why they're here?" The question catches you off guard. You've been trained to see the enemy as just that, an enemy, not men with hopes and fears like your own. But in the intimate darkness, such thoughts seem less traitorous. I expect so, you answer slowly. Most of them are just farm boys like us, got caught up in something bigger than themselves. Samuel is quiet for a long moment. My wife's cousin joined the Confederate Army. Good man, used to come for Christmas dinner every year. His voice holds wonder at the strange twists of fate that might soon have him aiming his rifle at someone he once shared a table with. The night deepens. You trade places with Samuel, leaning your back against the log and trying to find a position that allows for some rest without fully surrendering to sleep. Your rifle rests across your lap, a constant companion. Despite your best efforts, exhaustion eventually pulls you into a shallow sleep filled with fragmented dreams. You're back on your family's farm, the wheat fields golden in summer sun. Then suddenly the wheat is on fire, and the sound of the flames becomes the sound of gunfire. You're running, but your legs won't move properly. Someone is calling your name. Wake up! Samuel's urgent whisper brings you instantly alert. Listen. You strain your ears and hear it, the faint but unmistakable sound of horses moving slowly through the forest to your left. Not your own cavalry, they'd be coming from behind your position. These must be Confederate scouts probing the Union line. Samuel has already quietly shifted into a firing position, his rifle aimed toward the sounds. You follow suit, heart pounding so loudly you fear it might give away your position. The horses sound closer now, though still invisible in the darkness. You estimate there are 3 or 4 riders moving cautiously. A twig snaps, startlingly loud in the night silence. The horses stop. You hold your breath, finger resting lightly on your trigger. One squeeze and you'd announce your position to every Confederate within earshot. Better to let them pass if possible. Report their movement once they're gone. Minutes pass in frozen silence. Then slowly, the sound of hoofbeats resumes, this time moving away from your position. They've chosen a different path. Perhaps sensing the danger without seeing it. You and Samuel exchange a glance of relief in the darkness. By the time dawn begins to lighten the eastern sky, you're fully awake again, every muscle tense with anticipation. The company officer moves quietly along the line of pickets, gathering reports of nighttime observations. You tell him about the Confederate horsemen, and he nods grimly. They're out there all right, he confirms. Main force about 2 miles north. Will likely make contact today. The regiment forms up as the sun rises, not in marching column this time, but in battle formation. Companies arrange themselves by the book, creating a blue line 2 ranks deep that stretches across the open field. Officers on horseback position themselves behind the line, while skirmishers, men selected for their marksmanship and initiative, deploy ahead to make first contact and screen the regiment's advance. Your company forms part of the main line, positioned near the center right of the regiment. You stand shoulder to shoulder with your comrades, close enough to feel Samuel trembling slightly beside you, though whether from illness or nerves you can't tell. Probably both. The order comes to advance. The blue line begins to move forward across the field, maintaining its formation with impressive discipline considering the uneven ground. Each step brings you closer to whatever waits beyond the far tree line. Your mouth is dry, your palms sweaty around the rifle stock. The familiar symptoms of pre-battle fear wash through you, the churning stomach, the need to urinate, the heightened awareness that makes colors seem brighter and sounds sharper. You're not the same frightened boy who faced his first battle months ago. Experience has taught you that fear can be managed, can even sharpen your reactions when the shooting starts. But the fear never goes away completely, not for anyone. The veterans just hide it better. 500 yards from the tree line, the first shot rings out, a Confederate picket firing at the Union skirmishers. Then another shot and another. The skirmishers return fire, small puffs of smoke marking their positions ahead of the main line. The scattered exchange of fire quickly intensifies as more Confederate troops reveal their positions along the edge of the forest. "Steady, boys," the captain calls from behind your company. "Keep moving forward." The regiment advances at a measured pace despite the increasing fire. Men fall here and there as Confederate bullets find their marks, but the line closes around these gaps and continues forward. 400 yards, 300. The fire intensifies. "Company, halt!" The command rings out and the blue line comes to a stop. "Ready?" You raise your rifle to the ready position, your movements automatic after countless drills. "Aim!" You bring the rifle to your shoulder, sighting along the barrel toward the smoke-shrouded tree line where muzzle flashes reveal enemy positions. Fire! The regiment's first volley crashes out in a thunderous roar, hundreds of rifles firing almost as one. The recoil punches into your shoulder and acrid smoke envelops the line. Through the haze, you can see your bullets striking the trees and ground around the Confederate positions, with some finding human targets. Rebel soldiers fall, but others continue firing. Load! Your hands move through the familiar motions. Tear open a paper cartridge with your teeth, pour powder down the barrel, ram the Minié ball home, place a percussion cap on the nipple. The process takes about 30 seconds for an experienced soldier, time during which you're vulnerable to enemy fire. "Ready! Aim! Fire!" Another volley, another cloud of smoke. The air is now thick with it, obscuring your view of the battlefield. The noise is deafening, not just the crash of hundreds of rifles, but the whine of bullets passing nearby, the shouts of officers, the screams of the wounded. All around you, men are loading and firing in a deadly rhythm. To your right, Jenkins falls suddenly, a red stain spreading across his blue jacket. There's no time to help him. The line has already closed to fill his place, and the next command to fire is coming. This is the terrible arithmetic of battle. One man falls, the line contracts, the firing continues. Samuel still stands beside you, his face pale but determined as he reloads his rifle. He meets your eyes briefly during a pause in the firing, and something unspoken passes between you, an acknowledgement that you're both still alive, at least for now. The battle unfolds in a series of smoky tableaus, moments of intense clarity punctuating the chaos, the Confederate line attempting a flanking movement to your left, only to be met by a Union cavalry charge, a rebel officer on a white horse raising his sword to rally his men before disappearing in a hail of bullets. The regimental flag falling as its bearer is hit, then instantly raised again by another soldier. Time loses all meaning in the midst of combat. It might be minutes or hours that you've been standing in this field, loading and firing your rifle until the barrel becomes too hot to touch. Your world has narrowed to the most basic elements of survival, the mechanical actions of reloading, the strain to see targets through the smoke, the constant awareness of the men to either side. A new sound cuts through the din of battle, the distinctive boom of artillery. Confederate cannon have opened fire from a position to the north, sending shells screaming toward the Union line. The first rounds fall short, throwing up geysers of dirt and stone. But the rebel gunners are finding their range, each shell landing closer to your position. Down, someone shouts as a shell lands 20 yards ahead of your company. You drop instinctively, feeling the concussion of the explosion as dirt and fragments rain down. When you rise, there's a gap in the line where 3 men had been standing seconds before. The artillery changes the complexion of the battle. The Union line begins to waver under the combined pressure of Confederate infantry fire and the devastating artillery barrage. Men look to their officers, seeking guidance or reassurance, but the smoke makes it difficult to see more than a few yards in any direction. Fall back! The order finally comes, passed along the line by officers and sergeants. Fall back to the tree line, orderly withdrawal. Retreat is perhaps the most dangerous moment in battle. To turn your back on the enemy, to break the cohesion of the line. These actions invite disaster if not executed with discipline. Your company begins to withdraw, walking backward while continuing to fire, providing cover for each other. You help Samuel, who stumbles as a shell explodes nearby, nearly knocking him off his feet. His face is grey with exhaustion and illness, but he keeps moving, keeps fighting. Together you make it to the relative shelter of the forest edge, where the regiment begins to reform its line among the trees. The battle continues until dusk, a stalemate of attack and counterattack across the contested field. By nightfall, both sides withdraw to lick their wounds and prepare for the next day's fighting. The cost has been high. Your company alone has lost 12 men killed or wounded, including Jenkins and Thompson. In the makeshift field hospital behind the Union line, surgeons work by lamplight, their aprons dark with blood as they treat the wounded. The sound of sawing reaches your ears, amputations being performed on men with shattered limbs. The lucky ones get chloroform or ether before the blade touches them. Some get only a shot of whiskey and a leather strap to bite down on. You and Samuel sit silently at the edge of the camp, too exhausted to speak, too wired from combat to sleep. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, another test of courage, skill, and simple luck. For now, you clean your rifle, check your remaining ammunition, and watch the stars emerge above the battlefield. The same stars that shine over Ohio and Pennsylvania, over the homes you both dream of seeing again. This is the reality of a Civil War soldier's life. Long periods of boredom and hardship punctuated by moments of absolute terror. Not the glorious adventure promised by recruitment posters, but a grinding test of endurance where survival itself is victory. And you're one of the lucky ones. You're still alive, still able to fight, still holding on to the hope of someday returning home. As you finally stretch out on the hard ground, rifle at your side, you wonder what tomorrow will bring. More marching, more fighting. You've learned not to look too far ahead. In war, the future extends only as far as the next sunrise. For now, it's enough to have survived another day in the life of a Civil War soldier. You wake with a start, momentarily disoriented. The ground beneath you is damp and a fine mist hangs in the early morning air. Around you, men are stirring, their movements slow and stiff after sleeping on the cold earth. Yesterday's battle feels both impossibly distant and terrifyingly immediate, like a nightmare you can't quite shake off. Samuel lies beside you, his breathing shallow and rapid. His cough has worsened overnight, and a sheen of sweat covers his forehead despite the morning chill. You place a hand on his shoulder, feeling the heat radiating through his damp uniform. "I'm fine," he mutters before you can speak, pushing himself up to a sitting position with visible effort. "Just need to get moving." You both know he's not fine. The combination of pneumonia and exhaustion from yesterday's battle has pushed him to his limits. But what choice does he have? The regiment is preparing to move out, and any man who can't keep up will be left behind at a field hospital. places, soldiers have learned to fear almost as much as the battlefield itself. The regimental surgeon, Dr. Morris, moves through the camp checking on the wounded who weren't evacuated yesterday. He's a grim-faced man in his 40s with bloodstains permanently embedded in the creases of his hands. When he reaches Samuel, he listens to his chest with a stethoscope, his expression revealing nothing. Pneumonia, he confirms, though you all knew this already. Should be in hospital. Samuel shakes his head firmly. I can march, Doc. Just give me something for the cough. The doctor sighs. He's had this conversation countless times before. From his bag, he produces a small bottle of dark liquid. Laudanum, he explains, handing it to Samuel. Take a few drops when the cough gets bad. Not too much. It's addictive stuff. He moves on to the next patient without further discussion, aware that dozens more need his attention before the regiment moves out. Laudanum, a tincture of opium mixed with alcohol. You've seen men become dependent on it, their eyes glazed and movements sluggish, but still they beg the doctors for more. It's effective, though, one of the few truly effective medications available to Civil War doctors. The camp bustles with pre-march activity. Men roll their blankets, pack knapsacks, and form into companies. The wounded from yesterday's battle have been moved to a field hospital set up in a nearby church. Those who can't be moved are placed in farm wagons to travel with the regiment until they reach a more permanent medical facility. Today's objective is unclear. Rumours contradict each other as usual. Some say you're marching to join a larger force preparing for a major offensive. Others insist you're withdrawing to more defensible positions. The enlisted men rarely know the big picture. Your world has shrunk to the immediate concerns of your company and regiment. Breakfast is coffee and hardtack again. The biscuit's so hard you need to soak it in your coffee to make it edible. The coffee itself is a precious commodity. Many men would rather go without food than miss their morning cup. It's one of the small comforts that makes the hardships bearable. As you eat, you take stock of your company. The losses from yesterday are evident in the gaps in the ranks. Jenkins is gone, likely dead, though you never saw what happened to him after he fell. Thompson is in the field hospital with a bullet wound to his shoulder. He might survive if infection doesn't set in. Monroe sits nearby, quietly playing his harmonica, the mournful tune at odds with the bustling camp around him. Mail call before we move out, announces Wilson, the company clerk. A cheer goes up from the men. Mail is the closest thing to home any of you have out here. This time your name is called. The letter is from your mother, dated 3 weeks ago. You tuck it inside your jacket to read later, saving it like a precious gift to be unwrapped at the right moment. Samuel gets nothing this time, but he doesn't seem to notice, his attention focused on simply remaining upright. The regiment forms up, companies falling into their assigned places in the column. Your captain, a young West Point graduate named Harrington, walks the line inspecting his men. He pauses briefly before Samuel, noting his flushed face and laboured breathing. "Private Matthews, are you fit to march?" he asks, his voice neutral. Samuel straightens as much as he can. "Yes, sir." The captain holds his gaze for a moment longer, then nods once. "Stay toward the rear of the company. If you fall behind, report to the surgeon's wagon. It's as much accommodation as can be expected in these circumstances." The drums begin their familiar beat, and the column lurches into motion. Today's march is slower, more deliberate than yesterday's. The battle has changed the regiment's mood. Gone is the nervous anticipation, replaced by a somber awareness of what likely awaits at the day's end. The landscape you pass through bears the scars of war. Fences have been torn down to provide firewood for countless campfires. Fields that should be heavy with crops lie untended, their owners fled or pressed into military service. Occasionally you pass farmhouses where hollow-eyed women and children watch silently as the blue column snakes past their property. In one dooryard, a young woman stands with a bucket of water and a dipper, offering drinks to passing soldiers. Such acts of kindness from civilians are rare treasures. When your company reaches her, you accept a dipper of cool water with heartfelt thanks. She nods silently, her face showing the strain of living in this war-torn region. How many columns of soldiers, blue and grey, have passed her home? How many times has she watched young men march away, knowing many won't return? By midday, the temperature rises uncomfortably. Sweat soaks through your wool uniform and your feet slide painfully in your damp boots. The column halts briefly near a small stream, allowing men to refill canteens under the watchful eyes of sergeants who ensure no one lingers too long in the cool water. Samuel sits heavily on a fallen log, his face alarmingly pale except for two bright spots of colour high on his cheeks. He takes a small sip from the laudanum bottle, grimacing at the bitter taste. The medicine will ease his cough and provide some relief from the discomfort, but it can't cure the infection spreading through his lungs. "You should see the doctor," you say quietly, sitting beside him. "Get on one of the wagons." He shakes his head stubbornly. "Those wagons are for the wounded. I'll keep up." You don't argue further. There's a peculiar pride among soldiers, an unwillingness to admit weakness or seek special treatment when others are suffering worse. Besides, you've both seen the field hospitals, the rows of men lying on blood-stained straw as overworked surgeons move from one to the next, their aprons crusted with blood and matter. The mortality rate in those places is frightening, not just from wounds, but from the diseases that spread like wildfire among the weakened patients. The drums call you back to formation, and the march continues. The afternoon stretches endlessly, the monotony broken only by occasional rumours passing up and down the line. Confederate forces are rumoured to be regrouping north of your position. Artillery fire has been heard in the distance. A Union victory has been reported in the Western Theatre. Each piece of news is received with the same weary skepticism. You'll believe it when you see it. Samuel keeps pace, though each mile visibly costs him. The laudanum has taken the edge off his cough, but left him slightly disoriented, his eyes unfocused as he puts one foot mechanically in front of the other. You stay close, ready to catch him if he stumbles. By late afternoon, the column reaches its destination, a strategic crossroads where several regiments are gathering to form a larger force. Tents are already pitched in the surrounding fields, the encampment much larger than you're accustomed to. Campfires dot the landscape, and the smell of cooking food triggers a painful reminder of how little you've eaten today. Your company is assigned a position on the eastern edge of the encampment. As tents are pitched and fires built, rumours fly about the purpose of this gathering of forces. The most persistent is that a major engagement is planned for the day after tomorrow, a full-scale assault on Confederate positions 10 miles north. General McClellan himself is coming to take command, insists a corporal from another regiment. Going to be the decisive battle of the war. Veterans exchange knowing glances. They've heard such claims before. Every battle is going to be the decisive one until it isn't, and then the next battle takes on that mythical status. As darkness falls, you help Samuel to a fire where men from your company have gathered. Monroe plays his harmonica softly, a gentle counterpoint to the conversations around you. For a while, the talk is of home, harvests and holidays, sweethearts and siblings. These conversations are both comfort and torture, a reminder of all that waits beyond this world of mud and blood. "My oldest boy would be 12 now," says Reynolds, a weathered farmer from western Pennsylvania, old enough to help with the ploughing. Wife says in her letters that he's doing a man's work on the farm. Pride and sadness mingle in his voice, pride in his son's strength, sadness at missing these years of his childhood. "My girl's getting married this summer," adds Miller, a shoe cobbler before the war, "to her second choice since I was her first." The men laugh, but there's a bitterness beneath the humour. How many engagements have been broken by this long separation? How many soldiers will return home to find their places taken by those who didn't march away? Samuel sits quietly, occasionally sipping from his canteen, the laudanum having dulled both his physical pain and his connection to the conversation around him. You notice how the other men glance at him with concern but say nothing. This too is part of the brotherhood of soldiers, the shared understanding of when to offer help and when to preserve a man's dignity through silence. As the evening deepens, you finally find a moment to read your mother's letter. The paper is thin, the handwriting familiar and comforting. She writes of home, the apple trees blooming, the new calf born to the old cow, the church social where everyone asked after you. Between the lines of cheerful domestic news, you can read her worry, her desperate hope for your safe return. She mentions that the girl from the neighbouring farm, Emma, has been asking about you. This detail makes your heart beat a little faster. Before leaving, you'd barely had the courage to speak to Emma beyond polite greetings at church. The thought that she might think of you now, might even wait for your return, offers a fragile hope for a future beyond this war. The letter ends with a pressed flower, a violet from the patch beside the farmhouse door. The delicate purple blossom seems impossibly out of place here among the dirt and sweat of the military camp. You carefully place it back in the envelope, a talisman of home to carry with you. Night brings a cooler temperature and the relative luxury of a properly established camp. Tents are pitched in orderly rows, latrines dug at the appropriate distance, and guards posted at regular intervals. After weeks of hasty overnight stops during marches, this feels almost civilized. You and Samuel prepare for sleep, arranging your bedrolls inside the small tent. His condition has worsened throughout the evening, his breathing becoming more laboured, his skin hot to the touch. The laudanum bottle is nearly empty now. You need to see the doctor in the morning, you insist, no longer willing to respect his stubborn pride. This isn't getting better on its own. He nods weakly, perhaps too exhausted to argue further. If I'm not better by morning, he concedes, then falls into a restless sleep, punctuated by coughing fits that rack his entire body. You lie awake longer, listening to the sounds of the camp settling for the night. Someone in a nearby tent snores loudly. Sentries call to each other as they change watch. From a distant part of the encampment comes the sound of men singing "Home, Sweet Home," the melody carrying clearly in the night air. You find yourself humming along, the familiar tune bringing a lump to your throat. Sleep comes eventually, though it's light and broken. Your dreams are a confused mixture of home and war. You're ploughing the north field on your family's farm, but the furrows fill with blood behind you. You're sitting in church beside Emma, but the hymns become screams of wounded men. You're watching Samuel cough blood into a handkerchief that transforms into a Confederate flag. You wake before dawn to find Samuel's condition dramatically worsened. His breathing is shallow and rapid, his face flushed with fever, his nightshirt soaked with sweat. When you touch his shoulder, his eyes open, but they're glazed and unfocused. "Sarah?" he mumbles, clearly delirious. "Is that you?" Sarah, his wife's name. Your stomach clenches with fear. "This is bad, very bad." "It's me," you say gently. "I'm going to get the doctor." You hurry through the pre-dawn darkness to the surgeon's tent, praying that Dr. Morris hasn't been called elsewhere. To your relief, he's there, already awake and preparing his instruments for the day ahead. When you explain Samuel's condition, he nods grimly and follows you back to your tent. The examination is brief but thorough. Dr. Morris listens to Samuel's chest, feels his pulse, and checks his temperature. His expression tells you everything before he speaks. "Pneumonia, advanced stage," he confirms. He needs to be evacuated to a general hospital immediately. Within the hour, Samuel is loaded onto an ambulance wagon along with several other seriously ill soldiers. The two-wheeled vehicle is designed to transport wounded men as gently as possible over rough terrain, but it still looks painfully inadequate for the journey ahead. "I'll write to Sarah," you promise as they prepare to depart. "Let her know where you're being sent." Samuel nods weakly, momentarily lucid. "My things," he manages. "If I don't—" "You will," you interrupt firmly. "You'll be back with the company before you know it." Both of you understand this for the well-intentioned lie it is. Pneumonia kills more soldiers than bullets do, and Samuel's case is severe. The ambulance wagon pulls away, joining a small convoy headed for the nearest large town where a proper hospital has been established. You watch until it disappears from view, wondering if you'll ever see your friend again. There's little time to dwell on Samuel's departure. The regiment is preparing for a reconnaissance mission, and your company is selected to participate. After a hasty breakfast, you form up with 30 other men under the command of Lieutenant Parker, a nervous young officer recently promoted from the ranks. The mission is straightforward but dangerous. Advance 3 miles toward the reported Confederate positions, observe their strength and disposition, and return with the information. No engagement unless absolutely necessary. Speed and stealth are essential. Your company moves out in skirmish formation, each man about 5 yards from the next, creating a wide but thin line that can respond quickly to enemy contact. The morning mist provides some concealment as you advance through woods and across small clearings, every sense alert for signs of Confederate pickets or patrols. The absence of Samuel beside you feels like a physical wound. You've grown so accustomed to his presence, his quiet strength, his dry observations, his steadfast reliability, that operating without him leaves you off balance. The new man assigned to your position in the skirmish line, a fresh-faced recruit named Davis who can't be more than 17, seems painfully young and inexperienced by comparison. "Stay close to me," you tell him quietly as you move through a patch of dense undergrowth. "Watch what I do." He nods gratefully, clutching his rifle with white-knuckled hands. You remember being that terrified once, though it seems a lifetime ago now. War ages a man quickly, those who survive anyway. The skirmish line advances cautiously for nearly 2 hours, encountering no resistance. Lieutenant Parker begins to grow confident, perhaps too confident. He pushes the line forward at a faster pace, eager to reach a ridge that should provide a good vantage point of the valley beyond where Confederate forces are rumored to be concentrating. You feel increasingly uneasy as you approach the ridge. It's too quiet, the woods too still, even the birds have fallen silent. Beside you, young Davis senses it too, his movements becoming hesitant. "Lieutenant," you call softly, trying to catch Parker's attention. Something's not right. But the warning comes too late. As the first men in the skirmish line reach the crest of the ridge, a volley of rifle fire erupts from concealed positions ahead. 3 Union soldiers fall immediately, and the rest dive for whatever cover they can find. "Fall back!" Parker shouts, his earlier confidence evaporated. "Fall back to the tree line!" You grab Davis's collar, pulling him down behind a fallen log as Confederate bullets whine overhead. "Stay low," you instruct, your voice steady despite the hammering of your heart. "When I say move, run for those rocks 20 yards back. Don't stop, don't look back. Ready?" The boy nods, his face pale with fear but determined. You count to 3, then shout, "Move!" and both of you sprint for the rocks as covering fire from your comrades keeps the Confederate rifles momentarily at bay. The retreat is chaotic but effective. Lieutenant Parker may lack experience, but he manages to extract his men from the ambush without losing anyone beyond the initial casualties. Within 30 minutes, what remains of your company is regrouped in a defensive position a half-mile from the ridge, tending to the wounded and catching your breath. 3 dead, 5 wounded, a costly reconnaissance. Yet the mission has achieved its purpose. You've confirmed the presence of Confederate forces on the ridge, information that will be valuable to the regimental commanders planning the larger engagement to come. As stretcher bearers arrive to evacuate the wounded, you find yourself assigned to help carry a man with a bullet wound to his thigh. The work is grueling, the stretcher is heavy, the ground uneven, and the wounded man groans with every jolt despite your best efforts to move smoothly. By the time you reach the field hospital, your shoulders and arms burn with exhaustion. The hospital itself is a disturbing scene of organized chaos. Tents have been set up in a clearing, with operating tables positioned under the largest one. Surgeons in blood-spattered aprons move from patient to patient, making quick assessments. Those who can wait, those who need immediate attention, those beyond help. You've delivered your wounded comrade and are about to leave when a harried-looking nurse intercepts you. "You're with the 118th, aren't you?" she asks, wiping bloody hands on her already stained apron. "There's a man asking for you, or someone from your company." Your heart leaps with an impossible hope. Could Samuel have somehow ended up here instead of the general hospital? But the nurse leads you to a different tent where wounded men lie on straw pallets laid directly on the ground. The man she points to is Thompson, the schoolteacher from your company who was wounded in yesterday's battle. His face lights with recognition when he sees you. The bullet wound to his shoulder has been treated, but infection has clearly set in. His skin has the waxy pallor that you've learned to recognize as a dangerous sign. "Thought I might not see a familiar face before." He doesn't finish the sentence, but he doesn't need to. You both know what the infection means if it continues to spread. You sit beside him, offering your canteen. "You'll be back with the company by harvest time," you say, repeating the same well-intentioned lie you told Samuel earlier. "Giving us Shakespeare lessons around the campfire." Thompson smiles weakly. "Poor players that strut and fret their hour upon the stage," he quotes softly, "and then are heard no more." You stay with him until he drifts into a fitful sleep, then make your way back to the company's position. The reconnaissance mission has exhausted you physically, and the visits to the hospital, first with the wounded man, then with Thompson, have drained you emotionally. All you want is food and rest, but there's no guarantee of either. The remainder of the day passes in a blur of activity. The regiment prepares for tomorrow's planned assault, cleaning weapons, distributing ammunition, and receiving detailed instructions from officers who study maps and reports with grave expressions. The information from your morning reconnaissance has apparently confirmed the commander's plans. The attack will proceed as scheduled. As night falls, you find yourself sitting alone by a small fire, the absence of Samuel more acute than ever. Around you, other men engage in the usual pre-battle rituals. Some write letters home, just in case. Others clean their weapons obsessively, as if the perfect functioning of their rifle might be the difference between life and death tomorrow. A few pray quietly, fingering rosary beads or well-worn Bibles. Young Davis approaches hesitantly, hovering at the edge of the firelight until you notice him and gesture for him to sit. He's been assigned as your new tent mate, stepping into the space left by Samuel's departure. "Do you think it'll be bad tomorrow?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper. "The fighting, I mean." You consider how to answer. The boy deserves honesty, but not cruelty. "It won't be easy," you say finally, "but stay close to the veterans, do what they do, and you'll have a better chance." He nods, absorbing this. Then, after a moment, "I've never killed anyone before." The simple statement hangs in the air between you. You remember your own first battle, the strange disconnect between training to kill and actually doing it. The way time seemed to slow when you saw through your rifle's sights a Confederate soldier no older than yourself. His face visible for just an instant before you pulled the trigger. "When it happens," you say carefully, "you won't have time to think about it. You'll just act. The thinking comes later." Davis seems to accept this, though his expression remains troubled. He's at the beginning of a journey you're already well into, the transformation from civilian to soldier, with all the moral complexity that entails. As the camp quiets for the night, you lie in your tent listening to Davis's even breathing. He's fallen asleep with the exhaustion of youth, despite the danger that awaits tomorrow. You envy him that ability, even as you worry for his survival. Your own thoughts are too turbulent for easy sleep. You think of Samuel, hopefully receiving proper care in a general hospital, though the conditions in those places are often little better than the field hospitals. You think of Thompson, fighting infection that might well claim his life before the week is out. You think of Jenkins and the others who fell in yesterday's battle, their bodies already buried in hasty graves marked with wooden boards if they're lucky, unmarked if they're not. And you think of home, the farm in Ohio, your parents and siblings, the possibility of Emma waiting. It seems impossibly distant now, a dream from another life. Tomorrow's battle could end your chance of ever seeing it again, or it could be just another day in this seemingly endless war. One more test of endurance and luck to survive before the next challenge arises. Eventually, exhaustion overcomes even these racing thoughts and you slip into sleep. Your last conscious awareness is of clutching the letter from home, still in your pocket like a talisman against the dangers that tomorrow will bring. The dawn arrives with a thin, watery light filtering through a layer of fog that clings to the ground like a burial shroud. You wake instantly, your body trained by months of military routine to transition from sleep to full alertness without the luxury of gradual awakening. Beside you, Davis still sleeps, his young face relaxed and vulnerable in a way it never is during waking hours. Today is the day of the planned assault. The knowledge sits in your stomach like a lead weight, making the hardtack and coffee breakfast even less appetizing than usual. Around the camp, men prepare with quiet efficiency, checking weapons, securing equipment, exchanging few words. Veterans know that talking too much before battle only feeds the fear. Better to focus on tangible tasks and keep the mind occupied. You wake Davis with a gentle shake. "Time to get ready," you tell him, keeping your voice matter-of-fact to help calm his obvious nervousness. "Check your ammunition and make sure your canteen is full." The boy nods, fumbling slightly as he begins his preparations. You notice his hands trembling as he counts his percussion caps, but you pretend not to see. Everyone handles pre-battle nerves differently, and drawing attention to his fear would only make it worse. By 7 o'clock, the regiment has formed up in battle order. The fog is beginning to lift, revealing a landscape of rolling farmland interspersed with patches of woodland. Somewhere beyond that peaceful scene, Confederate forces wait in prepared positions. The ridge where your reconnaissance patrol encountered resistance yesterday is clearly visible about a mile distant, likely just the first of several defensive lines you'll need to overcome. Captain Harrington moves along the company line, his face composed but serious. Unlike some officers who lead from the rear, Harrington always positions himself at the front of his men during an advance. It's earned him their respect, though many wonder privately how long such a practice can continue before the statistical inevitability of a bullet finds him. "Men of Company K," he says, his voice carrying clearly in the morning stillness. "Today we advance against a determined enemy. Remember your training, stay in formation, support each other. The 118th has never failed in its duty, and we will not start today." It's a simple speech, free of the flowery patriotism that marked the early days of the war. 2 years of bloody conflict have stripped away such rhetoric, leaving only the essential truth. Your survival depends on the men beside you, and theirs on you. The regimental colonel rides up, accompanied by his staff. Unlike Harrington, Colonel Jennings is a political appointee with limited military experience, though he's learned quickly under fire. He confers briefly with the company commanders, then takes position at the head of the regiment. "Forward, march!" The order passes down the line, and the regiment begins to advance across the open ground toward the distant ridge. Other regiments move on your flanks, part of a coordinated assault involving thousands of men across a mile-wide front. In the distance, Union artillery opens fire, sending shells arching over your heads toward the Confederate positions. The initial advance is almost peaceful. If you could ignore the artillery fire and your destination, it might be just another march across pleasant countryside. Men step carefully through a wheat field, trying not to trample the nearly mature grain more than necessary. A farmer's livelihood, you think fleetingly, about to be destroyed by the machinery of war. Davis walks beside you, his steps matching yours, his young face set in an expression of forced calm. You notice he's positioned himself slightly behind you, using your body as a shield and guide. It's a natural instinct for new soldiers to align themselves with veterans this way. "Keep your eyes forward," you advise quietly. "Watch for the flash of rifle fire. When we get closer and they start shooting, aim for the smoke." He nods jerkily, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallows hard. His rifle is gripped so tightly his knuckles show white, but at least he's moving forward, putting one foot in front of the other. Some new recruits freeze completely their first time under fire. The peaceful advance ends abruptly as you cross the halfway point to the ridge. Confederate artillery, previously focused on counter-battery fire against the Union guns, now turns its attention to the advancing infantry. The first shells fall short, exploding harmlessly several hundred yards ahead, but the Confederate gunners are finding their range quickly. "Close it up!" Captain Harrington shouts as men instinctively begin to spread out. "Maintain formation!" This is perhaps the hardest discipline of all, to continue advancing in an orderly line when every instinct screams to scatter, to seek cover, to make yourself a smaller target. But experience has proven that a disciplined formation is more effective both offensively and defensively than a disorganized mob. A shell explodes 50 yards to your right, sending dirt and shrapnel flying. Men scream, some falling, others staggering but continuing forward. The formation wavers but holds, closing ranks around the gaps where soldiers have fallen. Davis flinches violently at the explosion, nearly dropping his rifle. "Steady," you tell him, your own voice surprisingly calm despite the hammering of your heart. "Just keep moving." Another shell, closer this time. The concussion feels like a physical blow, momentarily deafening you. Something hot stings your cheek. A tiny fragment of shrapnel that draws blood but causes no serious damage. You wipe it away without breaking stride. The regiment reaches the foot of the ridge, and now the real test begins. Confederate infantry, well protected in rifle pits and behind makeshift breastworks of fallen trees and rocks, open fire. The hillside erupts with hundreds of muzzle flashes, and the air fills with the distinctive hum of minié balls passing overhead or thudding into the ground around you. "Company, halt!" Harrington's voice cuts through the din. "First rank, kneel, ready." You drop to one knee, bringing your rifle to the ready position. Behind you, Davis and the other men in the second rank remain standing. "Aim!" You sight along your rifle barrel toward the flashes of Confederate fire, picking out what appears to be a grey-clad figure partially visible behind a fallen log. "Fire!" The company's volley crashes out, the recoil punching into your shoulder. Through the cloud of powder smoke, you can't tell if your target was hit, but there's no time to dwell on it. Already you're reaching for your cartridge box, beginning the practiced sequence of reloading. "Second rank, fire!" Behind you, Davis and the others discharge their weapons. You hear him cough as the acrid smoke envelops both of you, but he's already reloading, his movements mechanical, driven by drill and necessity rather than conscious thought. The regiment settles into the rhythm of battle. First rank fires while second rank reloads, then second rank fires while first reloads. It's a cycle designed to maintain continuous fire on the enemy position, preventing them from taking careful aim during the vulnerable reloading process. But the Confederate position is strong, their fire disciplined and accurate. Men fall around you with increasing frequency as the minutes stretch into a quarter hour, then a half hour of continuous exchange. The regiment has advanced no further than the foot of the ridge, pinned down by the devastating fire from above. Colonel Jennings rides along the regiment's position, miraculously untouched, despite being an obvious target on horseback. "Fix bayonets!" he shouts. "Prepare to charge!" A collective tension ripples through the ranks. The bayonet charge, a tactic from an earlier era of warfare, rendered increasingly obsolete by the improved range and accuracy of rifled muskets, yet still employed when firepower alone cannot dislodge an entrenched enemy. It will be costly, very costly, but there seems no alternative if the position is to be taken. You affix your bayonet with practiced movements, the 17-inch blade transforming your rifle into a deadly spear. Beside you, Davis fumbles with his bayonet, his hands shaking so badly he can barely attach it to his rifle barrel. Without a word, you reach over and help him secure it, meeting his terrified eyes with what you hope is a reassuring nod. "Regiment!" Colonel Jennings's voice carries over the din of battle. "Charge bayonets!" You rise to your feet, bringing your rifle to the prescribed position for the charge, bayonet at chest level, slightly angled upward. Forward, the regiment surges up the slope, no longer firing but moving as quickly as possible to close the distance to the Confederate line. The enemy fire intensifies, seemingly impossible but true, as every Confederate rifle focuses on the advancing blue wave. Men fall with every step, some crying out, others dropping silently, but the formation continues forward, closing ranks, maintaining the momentum of the charge. You're running now, breathing hard, aware of Davis still beside you, though you dare not take your eyes from the objective ahead. The world narrows to a tunnel of pure sensation, the pounding of your heart, the burning in your lungs, the weight of the rifle in your hands. Fear is present but distant, overwhelmed by the body's focus on immediate survival and the mind's retreat from the horror unfolding around you. 20 yards from the Confederate line, their fire begins to slacken as some defenders break and run rather than face the wall of bayonets advancing toward them. Others stand firm, firing one last desperate volley before dropping their rifles to draw pistols or their own bayonets for the imminent hand-to-hand combat. The two lines collide with a sound unlike anything in civilian life, a terrible crash of bodies, weapons, and voices raised in the primal screams of men fighting at the most basic level of human conflict. Your bayonet meets resistance, a Confederate soldier rising from behind a log, his own bayonet thrust toward you. You parry instinctively, driving your blade into his shoulder rather than his chest. He falls back with a cry of pain, his weapon dropping from suddenly nerveless fingers. You could finish him, a downward thrust would end his life, but some vestige of humanity stays your hand. Instead, you move past him toward the next defender, aware that such mercy might cost your own life if he recovers his weapon. Around you, the fight becomes a chaotic melee. The ordered formations of both sides have disintegrated into individual combats and small groups struggling for survival and advantage. Captain Harrington is down, clutching a bloody thigh but still shouting orders. Colonel Jennings's horse has been shot from under him, but the officer has drawn his sword and continues to lead on foot. Davis is still with you, his bayonet bloodied, though his face shows the shock of someone who has killed for the first time and can't quite believe what he's done. There's no time to comfort or counsel him. Another Confederate soldier appears before you, this one aiming a revolver at your chest. You react without conscious thought, lunging forward with your bayonet. The blade enters just below his ribs, and you feel a terrible resistance followed by yielding as it penetrates vital organs. His revolver fires, but the bullet goes wild as he falls. You wrench your bayonet free, trying not to look at his face as he collapses. This is the reality of combat that no drill or training can truly prepare you for. The intimate violence of killing and the knowledge that the enemy is not a faceless abstraction, but a man as real as yourself, with hopes and fears and people waiting for his return. The Confederate line breaks completely under the pressure of the Union charge. Those who can flee do so, running toward a second defensive line 200 yards further up the ridge. Others surrender, throwing down their weapons and raising empty hands. The remainder lie where they've fallen, the ground around the former position now carpeted with bodies in blue and grey. A momentary silence falls as the immediate fighting ends, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the continued sound of battle from other parts of the field where the engagement continues. You find yourself standing amid the carnage, suddenly aware of various minor injuries. A cut on your hand, a bruise on your thigh from a fall you don't remember taking. A burning graze along your ribs where a bullet passed close enough to tear your uniform and skin without penetrating. Davis stands nearby, staring at nothing, his rifle held limply at his side. The boy has survived his first true combat, but the experience has clearly shaken him to his core. You move to him, gently taking his arm. "It's over for now," you say, your own voice sounding strange in your ears. Let's see to the wounded. The work of battlefield aftermath is in some ways harder than the fighting itself. With the immediate danger past, the mind can no longer hold back the full horror of what has occurred. The dead lie in postures that would be impossible for the living. The wounded cry out for water, for help, for their mothers. The smell of blood, excrement and gunpowder forms a uniquely nauseating combination that clings to everything. You and Davis join other unwounded men in the grim task of separating the living from the dead and providing what immediate aid you can to your fallen comrades. Canteens are shared with the wounded, makeshift bandages applied to bleeding injuries, tourniquets improvised for shattered limbs. The surgeons and their assistants have moved up behind the advancing line and established a field hospital in a small copse of trees at the foot of the ridge, but there are far too many casualties for them to treat quickly. Captain Harrington's wound, thankfully, is not life-threatening. The bullet passed clean through the fleshy part of his thigh without hitting bone or major blood vessels. With assistance, he can still command, refusing evacuation until the battle's outcome is determined. "Reform the company," he orders, leaning on a makeshift crutch fashioned from a rifle with a broken stock. "We'll hold this position until further orders." What remains of Company K, perhaps 50 men out of the original 80 who began the advance, forms a defensive line facing the second Confederate position. But the expected order to continue the attack doesn't come. Instead, a courier arrives with instructions to hold the captured position while other regiments maneuver to flank the remaining Confederate defenses. The respite from immediate combat allows you to take stock of the company's losses. Jenkins and Thompson, whom you'd visited in the field hospital, are gone, evacuated further rearward or perhaps already dead. Monroe survived physically unscathed, but sits silently, his harmonica untouched in his pocket, staring at the blood on his hands. Reynolds took a bullet through the palm of his hand while reloading, a painful but not disabling wound that will eventually heal, though his days of ploughing may be over. Miller is among the dead, killed instantly by a bullet to the head during the final charge. And Davis has survived, though the boy who walked beside you this morning seems to have aged years in the space of a few hours. He performs his duties mechanically, helping with the wounded, retrieving ammunition from the dead, reinforcing the defensive position. But his eyes have the 1,000-yard stare you've seen in other men after their first true taste of combat. As afternoon wears on, the sounds of battle continue to your left, where other Union regiments are engaged in flanking maneuvers against the Confederate position. Your own regiment remains in its defensive posture, exchanging occasional long-range fire with the 2nd Confederate line, but not advancing further. You find a moment to sit with your back against a tree, finally allowing yourself to feel the full extent of your exhaustion. Every muscle aches, your throat is raw from gunpowder and shouting, and the minor wounds you sustained sting with sweat and dirt. You drink sparingly from your canteen, knowing that water resupply is uncertain and many wounded men will need what's available. Davis sinks down beside you, his young face streaked with dirt, powder residue, and what might be tears, though he'd never admit it. For a long moment, neither of you speaks, the shared experience of survival, creating a bond that needs no words. Finally, he breaks the silence. "I killed 3 men," he says, his voice flat. "At least 3 that I'm sure of." You nod, understanding what lies beneath the simple statement, not pride or boasting, but a kind of bewildered recognition of having crossed a threshold from which there is no return. "Does it get easier?" he asks after another silence. You consider lying, offering the comfort of false hope, but he deserves better than that. "Not easier," you say carefully. "You just learn to carry it differently." He seems to accept this, nodding slightly before lapsing back into silence. You sit together as the afternoon light begins to fade, 2 survivors amid the detritus of battle, momentarily united in the strange brotherhood that only combat creates. As evening approaches, orders finally arrive. The regiment will hold its position overnight, continuing the advance at dawn if necessary, but rumors suggest the Confederate forces are already withdrawing from their second line, recognizing that the Union flanking maneuver has made their position untenable. The night brings its own challenges. The wounded must be evacuated under cover of darkness, a process that continues for hours as stretcher bearers make countless trips between the battlefield and the field hospitals. The dead, those that can be reached safely, are collected for burial, their personal effects gathered for eventual return to their families. And the living must maintain vigilance against possible counterattack while snatching what rest they can in the uncertain hours of darkness. You help establish a small fire behind the protection of a stone wall where its light won't provide a target for Confederate sharpshooters. Around it gather the survivors of your immediate squad, Davis, Monroe, Reynolds with his bandaged hand, and 2 other men who've been with the company since its formation but with whom you've had little direct interaction. Food is hardtack and salt pork again, tasteless but necessary fuel for bodies depleted by the day's exertions. Coffee, when it arrives, is received with the reverence usually reserved for communion wine, a hot, bitter sacrament that momentarily washes away the taste of gunpowder and fear. Talk around the fire is minimal and practical. Speculation about tomorrow's orders, assessment of the Confederate strength, reports from other parts of the battlefield where Union forces have had varying degrees of success. No one speaks of the dead or the killing. Those topics belong to the private hours of darkness, when each man wrestles alone with his memories and conscience. As the fire burns down to embers, you prepare for sleep, spreading your blanket in a shallow depression that offers some protection from both the night chill and possible stray bullets. Davis does the same nearby, his movements betraying the bone-deep weariness that follows combat. "I keep seeing their faces," he says quietly, not looking at you but staring into the darkness. "The men I killed. I didn't expect to see their faces so clearly. You've experienced this yourself, the strange, almost photographic clarity with which the mind captures the expressions of men at the moment of their death. It's a vision that returns in dreams and quiet moments, sometimes years after the event. Write home tomorrow, you advise, knowing there's no real comfort to offer but feeling obligated to try. It helps to remember there's a world beyond all this. He nods, pulling his blanket closer around his shoulders. Within minutes, exhaustion claims him, his breathing settling into the rhythm of sleep despite the discomfort of the hard ground and the distant sounds of pickets exchanging sporadic fire. Your own sleep is longer in coming. Your thoughts turn to Samuel, wondering if he's receiving proper care in the general hospital, if the pneumonia has worsened or begun to resolve. You think of home, of your mother's letter and the pressed violet that somehow survived the day's violence in your breast pocket. And you think of the men you killed today, not with guilt exactly, but with a somber recognition of the irreversibility of death and the strange circumstances that bring men who have no personal quarrel to kill one another in fields far from home. When sleep finally comes, it's deep and dreamless, the body's defense against the mind's tendency to replay the day's horrors. You wake only once during the night, roused by the sound of Davis crying quietly beside you. You pretend not to hear, granting him the privacy to process his grief and shock in his own way. By morning, he'll have composed himself again, putting on the mask of stoicism that soldiers learn to wear. But for now, in the darkness, he's still partly the boy who left home seeking adventure and glory, only to find the brutal reality of war. Dawn breaks with a light rain falling, turning the battlefield's churned earth to mud and washing the blood into the soil. The expected order to advance doesn't come. Confederate forces have indeed withdrawn during the night, abandoning their second line and falling back to stronger positions several miles distant. The immediate battle is over, though the larger campaign continues. The regiment spends the day recovering, burying the dead, improving defences in case of counterattack, replenishing ammunition and supplies. Letters are written to families of the fallen, a task that falls to officers, but that often requires input from comrades who witnessed a man's final moments. It's a grim duty, but an important one. Families cling to details of how their loved ones died, seeking meaning or at least closure in the circumstances of their loss. You find yourself appointed acting sergeant for what remains of your squad, the previous sergeant having been among those killed during the charge. It's a field promotion born of necessity rather than formal recognition, but it carries real responsibilities. Organising the men, conveying orders, reporting to Lieutenant Parker, who has temporarily assumed command of the company in Captain Harrington's partial incapacitation. The new role keeps you busy throughout the day, leaving little time for reflection on yesterday's events. Perhaps that's a blessing. The mind can only process so much horror at once, and sometimes the merciful thing is to focus on immediate, practical tasks rather than dwelling on the larger questions of life, death, and war. By evening, a kind of normalcy has reasserted itself within the regiment. Tents are pitched in orderly rows, cook fires burn, producing the usual unappetizing but filling fare. Men clean weapons, mend clothing, write letters home. The surface routine of military life continues, though beneath it runs the undercurrent of yesterday's violence and the knowledge that similar experiences likely await in the days ahead. Mail arrives unexpectedly, a welcome surprise that immediately lifts the regiment's collective mood. Among the letters is one addressed to Samuel, forwarded from another unit before the mail clerks learned of his evacuation. You take custody of it, adding it to your pack alongside the letter you've drafted to his wife explaining his condition and whereabouts. There's nothing for you this time, but Davis receives a package, a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and string. He opens it with the eagerness of a child at Christmas, revealing home-baked cookies carefully packed to minimize breakage during their long journey. Though slightly stale, they're still a luxurious change from army rations. Davis shares them without hesitation, passing the package around the fire so each man can take one. It's a small gesture but a significant one, an affirmation of the bonds that have been forged and strengthened by yesterday's shared danger. Even Monroe, still unusually quiet since the battle, accepts a cookie with a nod of thanks. As darkness falls completely, rain continues to patter softly on the tent canvas above you. The sound is almost soothing, a natural counterpoint to the lingering memories of yesterday's gunfire and screams. Davis lies nearby, already asleep despite the early hour, his body still recovering from the physical and emotional demands of combat. You stay awake a while longer, using the faint light of a sheltered candle to write in the small pocket diary you've maintained since the beginning of your service. The entry is brief, just the date, location, and a few words about the charge and its aftermath. Not because you lack thoughts or feelings about the experience, but because some things defy expression in written language, belonging instead to the silent understanding shared by those who were there. Outside, the rain falls steadily on the sleeping camp, on the fresh graves of the fallen, on the abandoned Confederate positions, and on the countryside beyond where ordinary life continues despite the war that has temporarily transformed this peaceful landscape into a place of death and suffering. Tomorrow will bring new orders, new marches, perhaps new battles, but for tonight at least there is the small mercy of rest. Morning comes with the familiar sound of bugles and drums calling the regiment to attention. The rain has stopped during the night, but the ground remains sodden, turning the camp into a quagmire of mud that clings to your boots with each step. You rouse Davis, who wakes with the momentary confusion of someone who has briefly forgotten where he is, before reality settles back onto his young shoulders like a heavy cloak. Orders came through while you were sleeping, you inform him as he struggles to fully wake. We're moving out in an hour. The Confederates have fallen back to a defensive line along the river, and we're to join the pursuit. The news is met with a resigned nod. After yesterday's battle, the prospect of another march and possibly another fight should be terrifying, but Davis, like most soldiers after their first true combat, has entered a state of numb acceptance. The worst has happened and he has survived. Whatever comes next can be endured. Breakfast is the usual hardtack and coffee, though the coffee is weaker than normal. Supplies are running low, and what remains is being stretched thin. Around the camp, men prepare for the march with practiced efficiency, packing their meager belongings, cleaning rifles that were hastily wiped down after yesterday's fighting, checking ammunition and equipment. Captain Harrington, his wounded leg professionally bandaged but still unable to walk without assistance, has been evacuated to a field hospital against his protests. Lieutenant Parker is now formally in command of what remains of Company K, 47 men out of the original 80 who began yesterday's advance. The losses are severe but not unusual for a frontal assault against prepared positions. As acting sergeant, you're responsible for ensuring your squad is ready to march. Davis, Monroe, Reynolds, and the two other men, Bennett and Wilson, look to you for guidance with the automatic deference soldiers show to anyone with perceived authority, regardless of how recently that authority was conferred. Bennett, help Reynolds with his pack. That hand's going to give him trouble. You issue instructions calmly, finding that the responsibility actually steadies your own nerves. Wilson, check everyone's ammunition. We don't know what we'll encounter today. The men comply without question, falling into the rhythm of preparation that has become second nature after months in the field. Monroe remains unusually quiet. He hasn't played his harmonica since before yesterday's battle, but he performs his duties efficiently, his face set in an expression of grim determination. Just before the regiment forms up for the march, a courier arrives with mail that had been delayed reaching the front lines. You're surprised to hear your name called and receive not one but two letters, one from your mother and another, unexpectedly, from Emma, the girl from the neighbouring farm. You tuck them both inside your jacket, saving them for a more private moment. Whatever news or sentiments they contain, good or bad, deserves better than a hasty reading during the confusion of breaking camp. The regiment moves out under a sky that threatens more rain, the column winding its way across the battlefield of yesterday and beyond, following the Confederate retreat. The evidence of recent fighting is everywhere: discarded equipment, hastily dug and abandoned rifle pits. Occasional unburied bodies of men who fell in areas overlooked by burial details. The sights that would have horrified you months ago now register as merely notable, a measure of how the war has gradually hardened your sensibilities. Davis walks beside you, still in the position of the junior soldier seeking protection from a veteran, though after yesterday's charge such distinctions feel increasingly arbitrary. Survival in combat owes as much to chance as to experience, a lesson every soldier learns eventually. "I wrote to my mother last night," he says after nearly an hour of silence. "Told her I was fine, that the fighting wasn't as bad as people say." He pauses, staring at the muddy road ahead. "That was a lie, wasn't it? It's exactly as bad as they say. Worse, maybe." You consider your response carefully. The boy, though after yesterday that term seems increasingly inadequate, deserves honesty, but there's also value in maintaining the protective lies that allow soldiers to function. "It's not a lie if it gives her peace," you say finally. "And maybe it wasn't as bad for you as it could have been. You're still walking." He accepts this with a nod, perhaps recognizing the pragmatic truth beneath the rationalization. Many men didn't walk away from yesterday's charge. Compared to them, Davis's experience was indeed not as bad as people say. The march continues through the morning, the column moving at the deliberate pace of an army in pursuit but not in direct contact with the enemy. By noon, scouts report that the Confederate rearguard is just 2 miles ahead, suggesting that the main rebel force has indeed established a new defensive line along the river as intelligence had indicated. The regiment halts in a small clearing to rest and receive orders. Lieutenant Parker gathers the sergeants, including you in your acting capacity, to relay instructions from regimental command. "We're to advance to this position," he explains, indicating a point on his map about a mile ahead. "Establish a skirmish line and probe the Confederate defenses, but do not engage in a general action without direct orders. The main assault, if there is one, will come tomorrow after artillery has had a chance to soften their positions." The orders are received with relief by most of the sergeants. After yesterday's costly charge, the prospect of a limited engagement with the enemy is far preferable to another full-scale assault. You return to your squad and explain the situation, emphasizing that while there may be shooting, no major battle is planned for today. The regiment moves out again, advancing cautiously now that enemy contact is likely. Companies deploy into skirmish formation, spreading out to minimize casualties from artillery fire and to cover more ground as they probe for Confederate positions. Your squad forms part of this extended line, each man about 10 yards from the next, moving forward through light woods that offer some concealment from enemy observation. The first shots come as the skirmish line emerges from the woods into open farmland. Confederate pickets, positioned about 400 yards ahead, fire a ragged volley before withdrawing toward their main line. No one in your immediate vicinity is hit, though you hear a cry of pain from somewhere to your left. Lieutenant Parker orders the skirmish line to continue advancing, using whatever cover the landscape provides: shallow ditches, isolated trees, slight rises in the ground. The Confederate pickets continue falling back, offering just enough resistance to slow the Union advance without becoming decisively engaged. By mid-afternoon, the regiment has reached the position indicated in Parker's orders, with a clear view of the Confederate main line about half a mile distant. The rebel position is formidable, a natural ridge overlooking the river, reinforced with hastily constructed breastworks and with artillery pieces visible at intervals along its length. Any frontal assault would be costly, perhaps even more so than yesterday's charge. The skirmish line halts and begins to construct light defensive works of its own. Nothing elaborate, just shallow rifle pits and low barricades of fallen timber and fence rails that might provide some protection if the Confederates counterattack. It's hot, exhausting work, made more difficult by the muddy ground and limited tools, but essential for survival if fighting resumes. Davis works alongside you, digging with a short-handled entrenching tool. The physical labor seems to ground him, providing a tangible task that requires no moral calculations or emotional processing. His movements are methodical and efficient, surprising in someone so recently introduced to this aspect of military life. "My father's a farmer," he explains when he notices your observation. "Been digging since I was old enough to hold a shovel. Different reasons, same motion." You nod, recognizing the value of transferable skills from civilian life. Your own experience on your family's farm has similarly prepared you for certain aspects of soldiering: the physical endurance, the ability to work in all weather conditions, the patience for repetitive tasks. It's a common thread among the regiment, which consists largely of farmers, labourers and tradesmen rather than the professional warriors of earlier conflicts. As evening approaches, the defensive position is deemed adequate and men begin to establish a makeshift camp. No fires are permitted this close to the enemy line, which means no hot coffee and no cooking. Dinner is cold hardtack and salt pork, washed down with water from canteens that imparts a metallic taste from long storage. With the immediate work complete and darkness falling, you finally have a moment to read your letters. You move slightly away from the others, seeking what privacy can be found in an army encampment, and carefully open the letter from your mother first. The familiar handwriting brings an immediate pang of homesickness. She writes of everyday matters: the spring planting, a neighbour's new baby, your father's plans to expand the barn. Between these mundane details, her worry for you is evident in every line, though she tries to mask it with cheerful news and questions about your welfare that she knows you'll answer with reassuring lies. The second letter from Emma is unexpected and therefore all the more precious. Her handwriting is delicate but clear, the words carefully chosen. She writes that she thinks of you often, that she keeps the single letter you sent before marching off to war, that she prays for your safe return. It's not a declaration of love, that would be too forward for a proper young woman, but the sentiment behind the carefully composed sentences is clear enough. You read both letters twice, then carefully fold them and place them in the inner pocket of your jacket, close to your heart. In the midst of war's chaos and brutality, these fragile connections to home and to a possible future beyond the conflict are talismans against despair. When you return to the squad's position, you find Davis has received a letter as well, delivered by a courier who came up from the rear with additional ammunition and rations. The boy's face as he reads shows a complex mixture of emotions: happiness at news from home, sadness at his separation from it, perhaps guilt at having lied about the realities of his experience. "My little sister lost her first tooth," he says, looking up from the letter with a smile that briefly transforms him back into the youth he chronologically is. "Ma put it under her pillow and told her the tooth fairy would leave a penny, but my sister says she's too old to believe in fairies." It's such a normal domestic detail, so incongruous with your current surroundings that it strikes you as almost comical. Yet it's precisely these connections to ordinary life that help maintain sanity amid the extraordinary circumstances of war. The night settles around the regiment, unusually quiet with no campfires and minimal movement to avoid drawing enemy attention. Pickets are posted at regular intervals, alert for any sign of Confederate activity, while the majority of men try to rest in preparation for what tomorrow may bring. Sleep is fitful at best. The ground is hard and damp, the night air grows increasingly chilly, and the tension of being so close to the enemy line keeps nerves on edge. You drift between shallow sleep and wakeful alertness, never fully surrendering to either state. Sometime past midnight, you're roused by Monroe sitting up suddenly beside you, a strangled cry escaping his lips before he clamps his hand over his mouth. The nightmare that woke him is evident in his wide eyes and trembling hands. Without comment, you offer him your canteen and he drinks gratefully, the simple act of swallowing seeming to ground him back in reality. "I keep seeing Miller," he whispers, naming the man from your company who died in yesterday's charge. The way he looked after the bullet hit him. He shakes his head as if trying to dislodge the image. "We joined up together, you know. Same day, same recruiting office. Known him since we were boys." You nod, understanding the particular anguish of losing someone who connects to life before the war. It's different from the grief of losing comrades met during service, carrying an additional weight of shared history and civilian identity. "Try to remember him before," you suggest quietly, careful not to wake the others. "From home, I mean, not from yesterday." Monroe nods slowly, his breathing gradually steadying. After a while, he lies back down, though you doubt he'll sleep much more tonight. Neither will you, most likely. Some nights are simply to be endured until dawn brings the distraction of activity and duty. Morning arrives with a light fog that shrouds the landscape, limiting visibility to about 100 yards. It's both blessing and curse. The fog conceals your position from Confederate artillery observers, but also prevents your own officers from accurately assessing enemy movements and dispositions. Breakfast is more hardtack, supplemented by a precious half ration of coffee that someone has managed to prepare using a small concealed heat source that produces minimal smoke. The hot liquid is reviving after the chilly night, though the taste is weak and bitter. Lieutenant Parker moves along the line, checking positions and providing what information he has about the day's likely operations. The main Union assault, it seems, has been postponed due to the fog. Instead, skirmishers will continue to probe the Confederate line, seeking weaknesses while artillery units move into position for a bombardment once visibility improves. Your squad is assigned to maintain its current position, exchanging occasional fire with Confederate skirmishers similarly deployed ahead of their main line. It's a less intense form of combat than yesterday's charge, more a deadly game of hide and seek, with men firing from cover, then moving to new positions before enemy sharpshooters can target them. Davis adapts to this type of fighting with surprising quickness. His farm boy experiences hunting small game translate well to the careful observation and patience required of a skirmisher. By mid-morning, he's accounted for at least 2 Confederate soldiers who exposed themselves too long while changing positions. "It's easier when you can't see their faces," he observes during a lull in the firing. just uniform and movement, almost like hunting deer back home. You understand what he means. The psychological distance created by picking off targets at 200 yards is vastly different from the intimate violence of yesterday's bayonet charge. The killing is still real, still final, but somehow less personally confronting. It's one of war's strange moral accommodations. The fog begins to lift by late morning, revealing the Confederate line more clearly. Union artillery, now properly positioned, opens fire on the rebel defenses. The familiar thunder of the big guns is oddly reassuring. It means that larger forces are at work, that your small part in this vast conflict is supported by the coordinated efforts of thousands of others. Confederate batteries respond, though their fire seems less coordinated and accurate than yesterday. Rumors filter down the line that the rebels are short on ammunition, that their supply lines have been disrupted, that they're preparing to withdraw across the river. No one knows if these reports are accurate, but they feed the cautious optimism that today might not require another costly infantry assault. Around noon, a courier arrives with orders and, unexpectedly, mail. The orders are straightforward. Maintain position, continue harassment fire, prepare for a possible advance later in the day if artillery succeeds in weakening the Confederate defenses. The mail is a more welcome surprise, having somehow caught up with the regiment despite its rapid advance from yesterday's battlefield. Among the letters is one addressed to you from a field hospital 20 miles back. Samuel's handwriting, shaky but recognizable. You open it immediately, hunger for news of your friend overriding the usual practice of saving letters for a quieter moment. Samuel's letter is brief, written during what he describes as a lucid interval between fever spikes. The pneumonia has worsened, requiring more aggressive treatment, but the hospital conditions are better than he expected. He's under the care of a contract surgeon, a civilian doctor employed by the army, who seems both competent and caring, a rare combination in military medicine. Most importantly, Samuel has received your letter to his wife and is grateful for your efforts to reassure her. He asks that you continue to write to her if you can, as his own strength for correspondence is limited. He closes with a simple but heartfelt line. Remember your promise if things go badly, but know that I intend to rejoin you and settle my own affairs when this sickness passes. The letter brings both relief and renewed concern. Samuel is alive and receiving care, but his condition sounds precarious. Pneumonia kills more soldiers than bullets do, especially when complicated by the general debility that months of hard campaigning produces in even the strongest men. You carefully fold the letter and tuck it away, making a mental note to write to both Samuel and his wife when opportunity permits. For now, though, duty calls. Lieutenant Parker is signaling for the sergeants to gather for new instructions. The lieutenant looks tired, the strain of command evident in the lines around his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. Like most officers in the volunteer army, he's learning the difficult business of leadership on the job, making decisions that affect men's lives without the benefit of formal military education or long experience. Artillery reports good effect on the rebel defenses, Parker informs the gathered sergeants. We're to advance our skirmish line to within 300 yards of their position, maintaining steady fire to pin down their infantry while our guns continue working. No general assault unless specifically ordered. The orders are reasonable. Advancing the skirmish line will increase pressure on the Confederates without exposing the regiment to the devastating casualties of a frontal assault against prepared positions. Still, moving forward under enemy fire, even as skirmishers with the ability to use cover, carries significant risk. You return to your squad and explain the situation. No one shows particular enthusiasm for advancing closer to the Confederate line, but neither is there reluctance or fear. After yesterday's charge, this seems like a manageable task, dangerous but not suicidal. We'll move by teams, you explain, drawing a rough map of the ground ahead in the dirt. 2 men advance while 3 provide covering fire, then switch. Use whatever cover you can find. Don't bunch up. Stay at least 5 yards apart. If someone gets hit, don't stop to help until the firing slackens. Everyone clear? The men nod, their faces showing the focused concentration of soldiers preparing for action. Even Davis has adopted this expression, the wide-eyed nervousness of yesterday morning replaced by a controlled alertness that makes him look years older. The advance begins with a general increase in fire all along the Union line, hundreds of rifles creating a continuous rolling volley that forces Confederate defenders to keep their heads down. Under this covering fire, the skirmishers begin moving forward in small groups, dashing from one position of cover to the next. Your squad advances smoothly, the men working together with practiced coordination despite never having trained specifically for this maneuver. Military necessity creates its own expertise, teaching lessons more effectively than any drill manual. The Confederate response is sporadic at first, then increasingly accurate as they recognize the threat of the advancing skirmishers. Bullets kick up dirt around you as you dash from behind a fallen log to a shallow depression that offers minimal cover. To your right, Davis slides into position beside a large rock, his rifle already coming up to his shoulder as he seeks targets along the rebel line. The advance continues yard by painful yard, each movement exposing the men to enemy fire, each new position offering temporary safety before the next dash forward. It's exhausting work, physically and mentally, the constant calculation of risk, the surges of adrenaline with each exposed movement, the strain of maintaining accurate fire while under fire yourself. A cry of pain draws your attention to the left, where Reynolds has fallen, clutching his leg. Bennett, his partner in the advance, hesitates momentarily, torn between continuing forward and helping his wounded comrade. "Keep moving," you shout over the din of gunfire. "I'll get him." Bennett nods and continues his advance, while you work your way carefully to Reynolds's position. The wound is serious, but not immediately life-threatening. A bullet has torn through the meat of his calf, causing significant bleeding but missing bone and major blood vessels. "Can you move? If I help you?" you ask, already tearing a strip from your own shirt to use as a temporary bandage. Reynolds nods through gritted teeth, his face pale but determined. With your assistance, he begins crawling toward the rear, staying low to avoid presenting a target to Confederate marksmen. You cover his retreat with occasional shots toward the rebel line, more to discourage accurate fire than with any expectation of hitting specific targets. Once Reynolds is safely on his way to the regimental aid station, you rejoin the advance, moving up beside Davis, who has maintained steady fire throughout the incident. His face is streaked with powder residue and sweat, but his hands are steady as he reloads his rifle. "Reynolds?" he asks briefly, eyes still scanning the Confederate line for targets. "He'll live," you respond, settling into position and bringing your own rifle to bear. "Good shot in the leg, but clean." Davis nods, seeming to accept this as relatively good news given the circumstances. The advance continues, the skirmish line gradually closing the distance to the Confederate position despite increasingly accurate rebel fire. By mid-afternoon, the Union skirmishers have reached their objective, a position approximately 300 yards from the main Confederate line, close enough to maintain effective pressure, but far enough to avoid the worst of the defensive fire. Your squad establishes a makeshift position using a combination of natural features and hastily piled fence rails, creating just enough cover to allow relatively safe observation of the enemy position. From this vantage point, the effects of the Union artillery bombardment are clearly visible. The Confederate breastworks show significant damage in several places, and at least 2 rebel artillery pieces appear to have been disabled. More importantly, the volume of Confederate return fire has noticeably decreased over the past hour, suggesting either ammunition shortages or a reduction in manning as troops are shifted to more threatened sectors. Lieutenant Parker moves carefully along the skirmish line, gathering observations from each squad. When he reaches your position, you report what you've seen, including your assessment that the Confederate defense seems to be weakening. Same all along the line, Parker confirms. Headquarters thinks they may be preparing to withdraw across the river tonight. We're to maintain pressure but conserve ammunition. No point wasting powder if they're already leaving. The news is received with cautious optimism by your squad. If the Confederates do withdraw, it means no assault will be necessary, a welcome reprieve after yesterday's costly charge. But experience has taught all of you that the enemy is often most dangerous when appearing to retreat, sometimes turning a withdrawal into a devastating counterattack if pursued too eagerly. The remainder of the afternoon passes in a pattern of sporadic firing interspersed with periods of watchful waiting. The Confederate fire continues to slacken, and by early evening it's reduced to occasional shots from what appear to be a thin line of skirmishers covering the main rebel position. As darkness falls, the Union line establishes a rotation for the night watch, allowing 2/3 of the men to rest while 1/3 maintains vigilance. Your squad draws the middle watch, meaning you can sleep for a few hours before taking your turn at guard duty. You use the opportunity to write letters by the light of a carefully shielded candle, one to Samuel, expressing hope for his recovery and providing news of the regiment, and another to his wife Sarah, offering reassurance about his care and condition without minimizing the seriousness of his illness. It's a difficult balance to strike, but honesty tempered with hope seems the kindest approach. Sleep, when it comes, is deep despite the hard ground and cooling night air. The physical and mental exertion of the day's activities has left you thoroughly exhausted, able to ignore discomforts that would have kept you awake in civilian life. Davis sleeps nearby, his young face relaxed in slumber, momentarily free from the strain of maintaining adult composure under fire. Your squad's watch begins at midnight, a 4-hour shift of tense alertness in the darkness, straining eyes and ears for any sign of Confederate movement. The night is unusually quiet, no artillery exchanges, minimal picket firing, just the occasional sound of distant movement that might be troops repositioning or might simply be the wind through trees. Dawn reveals what the night sounds had suggested. The Confederate force has indeed withdrawn across the river, leaving only a token rear guard that quickly retreats when Union skirmishers advance. The formidable position that might have cost thousands of lives to take by assault has been abandoned for strategic reasons known only to the Confederate High Command. The regiment moves forward cautiously, wary of traps or ambushes, but finds only the detritus of a hastily abandoned camp, discarded equipment too heavy to carry in retreat, cooking fires still warm, even the occasional personal item that speaks to the humanity of the enemy. A daguerreotype of a woman and child, a small worn Bible, a carefully preserved letter from home. Looking at these abandoned possessions, you're struck by the strange intimacy of war, how it brings men to kill other men with whom they might, in different circumstances, have shared a meal or swapped stories of home. Davis seems similarly affected, handling a found Confederate haversack with the same care he might show for a Union soldier's belongings. "They're just like us, aren't they?" he says quietly, examining a crude wooden spoon carved from a tree branch, some rebel soldier's attempt to create a small comfort amid hardship. Same hopes, same fears, just wearing different uniforms. It's a simple observation, but a profound one, particularly coming from someone who 24 hours ago was efficiently shooting at those same men from 300 yards. The ability to see the enemy as fully human while still performing the duties of a soldier is a complex moral position that many never achieve. As the regiment secures the abandoned Confederate position, orders arrive from division headquarters. You are to remain in place for 24 hours, resting and resupplying before continuing the pursuit of the retreating Confederate force. After the intensity of the past 2 days, the prospect of even a brief respite is welcome news. The day unfolds with a relaxed routine that feels almost luxurious after the constant tension of combat operations. Proper meals are prepared as supply wagons catch up with the advancing regiment. Mail is distributed, including newspapers that, though weeks old, provide a welcome connection to the wider world beyond the immediate military sphere. Men wash in the river, do laundry, mend clothing, write letters home, and engage in the 100 small tasks of personal maintenance that get neglected during active operations. You use the opportunity to check on Reynolds, now in a proper field hospital established in a farmhouse behind the Union line. His wound is clean and properly bandaged, the prognosis good for full recovery, though he'll likely be sent to a general hospital for convalescence. He seems in good spirits, already planning his return to the company despite the surgeon's estimate of at least 6 weeks recovery time. Returning to the regiment's position, you find Davis engaged in a makeshift baseball game that has sprung up in a flat area near the river. The boy, who seemed to age years during the recent fighting, is momentarily visible again, laughing as he rounds an improvised base made from a discarded haversack. It's a reminder that despite their experiences, many of these soldiers are still essentially youths, able to find joy in simple pleasures during the brief intervals between war's horrors. The day passes peacefully into evening, campfires burning openly now that there's no immediate enemy presence to observe them. Around these fires, men engage in the timeless activities of soldiers at rest, playing cards, telling stories, singing songs that speak of home and love and loss. Monroe has finally taken out his harmonica again, the sweet notes of Lorena drifting across the encampment as darkness falls completely. You sit with your squad, watching the firelight play across faces that have become as familiar as family over months of shared hardship. Whatever tomorrow brings, another march, another battle, another test of courage and endurance, tonight there is food, rest, and the comfort of comradeship. In war, such moments of relative peace are treasures to be savoured, memories to sustain the spirit through whatever challenges lie ahead. Morning arrives with thin sunlight filtering through a layer of high clouds, casting a soft, diffuse light over the encampment. The 24 hours of rest ordered by division headquarters is coming to an end, and the regiment prepares to resume its pursuit of the retreating Confederate force. There's a different energy in the camp today. The men are rested, fed, and clean by military standards, their spirits lifted by the brief respite and the enemy's withdrawal. You wake feeling more refreshed than you have in weeks. The combination of adequate sleep, hot food, and the absence of immediate danger having worked a kind of temporary magic on body and mind. Beside you, Davis is already up, meticulously packing his knapsack with the increased efficiency that comes from months of practice. "Mail call before we move out," he informs you, noticing you're awake. Wilson heard it from the company clerk, might be news from Samuel. The mention of Samuel sends a brief pang through your chest. It's been several days since his letter from the field hospital, and pneumonia can take sudden turns for the worse. You've seen strong men carried off by illness within days, their bodies unable to fight both infection and the accumulated hardships of military life. Breakfast is luxurious by campaign standards. Fresh bread brought up by the supply wagons, salt pork fried rather than eaten cold, and coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, as the veterans joke. Around the cooking fires, conversation flows easily, the men discussing everything from home news to speculation about where the Confederate force is heading, to good-natured debates about which company has the worst cook. Lieutenant Parker moves through the camp, checking preparations for the march with the increased confidence of someone growing into his command role. When he reaches your position, he pauses, a folded paper in his hand. "Orders came through this morning," he says, addressing you directly. "Your field promotion to sergeant is confirmed. It's not just acting anymore." He hands you the paper, an official document with the regimental colonel's signature, formalizing your new rank and the modest increase in pay that accompanies it. You accept it with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. Promotion means recognition of your abilities, but it also means increased responsibility for the lives of the men under your command. It's a weight that sits differently than the simple burden of combat, requiring moral courage as much as physical bravery. "Congratulations, Sergeant," Davis says with a genuine smile when Parker has moved on. The others in your squad offer similar sentiments, their expressions showing no resentment at your elevation, just acceptance and perhaps relief that the position has gone to someone they trust. Mail call comes as promised, the company clerk distributing letters and small packages to eager recipients. Your name is called twice, a letter from home and, more surprisingly, one from the general hospital where Samuel was sent. You open the second one first, heart pounding with apprehension. The letter isn't from Samuel himself, but from a hospital steward writing on his behalf. The news is mixed. Samuel's condition worsened significantly after reaching the general hospital, the pneumonia developing complications that nearly claimed his life. But the crisis has passed, the steward writes, and the doctors now expect a slow but steady recovery. Samuel is too weak to write himself, but dictated a brief message. "Tell the boys I'm too ornery to die. We'll rejoin when able, but maybe sometime. Remember your promise about Sarah if needed." Relief washes through you. Samuel alive, likely to recover, though clearly still in serious condition. You'll write to Sarah today, sharing the cautiously good news while preparing her for the likelihood of a long convalescence. The promise Samuel references is your agreement to help his family if he doesn't return, a common arrangement among soldiers, another thread in the web of mutual support that helps make the unbearable bearable. The letter from home contains family news, updates on the farm, community happenings, the ordinary details of civilian life that seem increasingly distant from your current reality. Your mother mentions that Emma asks about you whenever their families meet at church, her interest apparently becoming noticeable enough to prompt gentle teasing from your siblings. The thought brings a smile to your face and a momentary warmth that pushes back against the pervasive uncertainty of military life. The regiment forms up mid-morning, companies falling into marching order with practiced efficiency. Your company is assigned to the vanguard today, the leading element of the column, responsible for first contact if the enemy is encountered. It's a position of honor, but also of increased danger, requiring constant vigilance rather than the relative mindlessness of marching in the middle of a long column. As acting sergeant, now confirmed sergeant, you position your squad accordingly, placing the most experienced men at key points and keeping Davis near you, where his growing but still incomplete battlefield awareness can be supplemented by your own. The boy no longer seems like the frightened youth who joined your tent after Samuel's evacuation. His posture, movements, and expressions all reflect the accelerated maturation that combat forces upon the survivors. The march begins at a deliberate pace, the column winding along a road that parallels the river where the Confederate force reportedly crossed. The day is pleasantly cool, the high clouds providing relief from what might otherwise be oppressive summer heat. Under different circumstances, it might be a pleasant country walk rather than a military movement in pursuit of an armed enemy. By midday, scouts report that the Confederate rearguard has been spotted about 3 miles ahead, defending a crucial crossroads that the main rebel force passed through during the night. The regiment halts temporarily while officers consult maps and discuss approach options, then resumes its advance with increased caution. Your company deploys from marching column into a more dispersed formation, ready to respond quickly if contact occurs. The men move with the focused alertness that becomes second nature after sufficient combat experience, eyes constantly scanning the landscape, ears attuned to any sound that doesn't belong, muscles ready to react to threats from any direction. The first shot comes just after the column rounds a bend in the road, revealing the crossroads about half a mile distant. A puff of white smoke appears from a cluster of trees to the right, followed seconds later by the crack of a rifle. The bullet passes harmlessly overhead, but its message is clear. The enemy is present and prepared to contest your advance. Lieutenant Parker orders the company to deploy as skirmishers, spreading out to minimize vulnerability to enemy fire while advancing toward the Confederate position. Your squad takes position on the right flank, using a shallow drainage ditch that runs parallel to the road as partial cover. What follows is not a major battle, but the kind of limited engagement that characterized much of the war's daily reality. Brief, intense exchanges of fire between relatively small units, each seeking advantage through maneuver and marksmanship rather than overwhelming force. For the men involved, however, the danger is just as real as in the largest set-piece battles, each bullet equally lethal regardless of the engagement's strategic significance. Your squad advances by bounds, 2 men moving forward while the others provide covering fire, then switching roles. It's hot, exhausting work, requiring constant communication and coordination. Davis performs well, his movements becoming more fluid and confident with each successful advance. Whatever innocence he arrived with has been replaced by a competence that will serve him well if he survives to return home. The skirmish continues for nearly an hour, a dance of advance and retreat as the Union force gradually pushes the Confederate rearguard back from their defensive position. Casualties are minimal on both sides, 2 men wounded in your company, none in your immediate squad, with similar light losses visible among the retreating rebels. By late afternoon, the Confederate force abandons the crossroads entirely, withdrawing at a pace that suggests their main body is now safely beyond immediate pursuit. The regiment secures the position but does not continue the chase, having reached its assigned objective for the day. Tomorrow will bring new orders, perhaps another march, perhaps a more significant engagement if the Confederate force decides to make a stand rather than continue its retreat. Camp is established with the efficiency of long practice, tents rising in orderly rows, pickets posted at appropriate intervals, cooking fires built within designated areas. The routine of military life reasserts itself after the brief disruption of combat, men falling into the familiar patterns of evening activities, cleaning weapons, preparing meals, tending minor injuries, writing letters home. You check on the 2 wounded men from your company before seeing to your own squad's needs. Both have relatively minor injuries. One a bullet graze along the ribs that looks worse than it is, the other a fragment wound to the arm from a shattered tree branch. Neither will require evacuation to a field hospital, though both will need a few days of lighter duty while they heal. Returning to your squad's position, you find Monroe playing his harmonica softly while the others engage in various evening tasks. The music drifts across the camp, a poignant counterpoint to the metallic sounds of ramrods in rifle barrels and the low murmur of conversations around dozens of small fires. It's a moment of simple beauty amid circumstances that offer few such respites, and you pause to appreciate it before addressing the necessary preparations for tomorrow. Sergeant, Davis approaches, interrupting your brief reverie. Found these while securing the crossroads. He holds out a small packet of letters bound with a faded ribbon. Clearly personal correspondence from some Confederate soldier's pocket or knapsack, accidentally left behind in the hasty retreat. You take the packet, weighing it thoughtfully in your hand. By rights, any abandoned enemy materials should be turned over to regimental headquarters for potential intelligence value. But these are obviously private letters, likely from family to a rebel soldier, containing no military information but immense personal significance to someone now unable to retrieve them. After a moment's consideration, you hand the packet back to Davis. Put them somewhere they might be found if he comes back looking, you say quietly. Under that large rock by the crossroads sign would work. Davis nods, understanding the decision without need for explanation. It's a small gesture of humanity in a conflict that increasingly strips away such considerations. A recognition that some bonds, like those between a soldier and his family, transcend the arbitrary divisions of war. The evening deepens into night, stars appearing in a sky now cleared of clouds. Your squad gathers around a small fire, sharing coffee and conversation in the way of soldiers who have faced danger together and emerged intact. The talk ranges widely. Memories of home, speculation about the war's progress, stories from civilian lives that seem increasingly distant with each passing month in uniform. My father fought in Mexico, Bennett offers during a lull in the conversation. Used to tell stories about it when I was a boy. Never mentioned this part, though. What part? Asks Wilson, stirring the fire with a stick. The waiting, the marching, the days where nothing happens except blisters and bad food. Bennett shrugs. His stories were all battles and glory, nothing about sore feet and dysentery. The observation prompts knowing chuckles from around the fire. It's a common experience, the gap between civilian perceptions of war shaped by newspapers and veterans' edited reminiscences and the lived reality of military service where heroic moments are islands in an ocean of mundane hardship. Think anyone will want to hear our stories when we get back? Davis asks, his young face serious in the firelight. The real ones, I mean, not just the exciting parts. The question hangs in the air, touching on concerns that many soldiers share but few articulate. How to bridge the experiential divide between those who have lived through combat and those who know war only through sanitized accounts. How to speak truthfully about experiences that seem unspeakable. How to return to communities that expect heroes and may not recognize the complex, changed individuals who come home. Some will want to know, you say finally. Family, close friends, people who care more about us than about having exciting stories to repeat. You pause, considering your own eventual return to the farm in Ohio, to parents who have never seen combat, to Emma, who knows you only as you were before the war. The rest, they'll get the stories they expect. Easier that way for everyone. The conversation shifts to lighter topics as the night advances, but Davis's question lingers in your thoughts. The gulf between soldier and civilian grows wider with each day in the field, each skirmish, each night spent on hard ground far from home. Bridging that distance upon return will require its own kind of courage, different from but perhaps no less demanding than battlefield bravery. As the fire burns down to embers, men begin retiring to their tents, exhaustion claiming them despite the relatively light physical demands of the day. Combat, even brief skirmishing like today's engagement, depletes energy in ways that far exceed its apparent physical exertion. The constant vigilance, the sustained focus, the emotional control required to function effectively under threat all extract their toll. You remain by the fire a while longer, using the solitude to compose a letter to Samuel's wife, Sarah. Finding the right balance between honesty and comfort is challenging, but you settle on a straightforward account of his condition as reported by the hospital steward, emphasizing the doctor's optimism while acknowledging the severity of his illness. You add personal observations about his strength of character and determination, qualities that have served him well in military life and will aid his recovery. The letter complete, you sit back, watching the last flames flicker among the coals. Tomorrow will bring whatever it brings. Another march, another skirmish, perhaps a major battle if the Confederate force decides to make a stand, or perhaps something entirely unexpected. War being the realm of chance and chaos, despite all attempts at planning and prediction. For tonight, though, there is the simple fact of survival. You have lived through another day of war, as have the men under your care. It's a modest victory, but not an insignificant one in a conflict where disease, accident, and enemy action claim lives with capricious regularity. Each sunset reached intact is a small triumph against the statistics of mortality. Davis emerges from the tent, moving to sit beside you at the dying fire. His expression is thoughtful, his movements carrying the slight stiffness that comes from muscles unused to the day's exertions despite months of military service. "Do you think it will end soon?" he asks, not looking at you, but staring into the embers. The war, I mean. It's a question every soldier asks eventually, usually in these quiet moments when immediate survival is not at stake and the mind can contemplate larger patterns. The answer is never satisfying. "I don't know," you reply honestly. "Feels different now than it did last year, but that doesn't mean it's nearly over." He nods, accepting the uncertainty. "My enlistment's up in 4 months, been thinking about whether to re-enlist or go home." The statement surprises you. Despite his rapid adaptation to military life, you've assumed Davis would return to civilian life at the first opportunity, reclaiming the normal progression from youth to adulthood that war has interrupted. That he's considering remaining in service suggests changes deeper than the obvious physical maturation and combat competence. "What's pulling you each way?" you ask, genuinely curious about his reasoning. He considers the question carefully before answering. "Home is, well, it's home. Family, the farm, a future that makes sense." He pauses, searching for words. "But it feels like leaving a job half done, you know. And the men here," he gestures vaguely toward the surrounding tents. "It's different from any other kind of friendship. Don't know if I could explain it to people back home." You understand precisely what he means. The bonds formed among soldiers transcend ordinary friendship, forged in shared danger and mutual dependence that civilian life rarely demands. It's a connection that many veterans find impossible to replicate after returning home, leading some to maintain lifelong associations with former comrades while struggling to form equally meaningful relationships with those who haven't shared their experiences. Whatever you decide, you tell him, make it your choice, not what you think your family expects or what the regiment needs or what sounds most noble. Just what you can live with when you look back years from now. He nods again, seemingly satisfied with the advice. What about you? Your 3 years must be nearly up too. The question turns your thoughts to your own eventual decision. Your enlistment has 11 months remaining, nearly a year of war still to endure before facing the choice Davis now contemplates. Home pulls strongly, the farm, your family, the possibility of a future with Emma if her interest proves durable. Yet the regiment has become a second family, the men around you as close as brothers in many ways. Haven't decided, you admit. Ask me in 11 months after I've seen how the war develops. The conversation lulls into comfortable silence, both of you watching the last embers fade to ash. Around the camp, similar scenes play out, men in quiet conversation or solitary reflection, processing the day's events, contemplating uncertain futures, finding what peace is possible amid circumstances designed to deny it. Eventually, exhaustion claims you both, sending you to the relative comfort of the tent where sleep comes quickly despite the hard ground beneath your blanket. Your dreams are a confused mixture of home and war, ploughing fields that turn to battlefields, familiar farm buildings transforming into military encampments, family members appearing among your squad. It's neither nightmare nor pleasant dream, simply the mind's attempt to reconcile the disparate realities that now comprise your existence. Morning arrives with familiar sounds, the bugle's call, the rustle of men emerging from tents, the clatter of equipment being gathered for another day's march. The routine of military life continues, each day building upon the last, the war's progress measured in miles advanced. Positions secured, casualties sustained and inflicted. But beneath this surface continuity, subtle changes accumulate. Davis moves with increased confidence, his questions more practical than fearful. Monroe plays his harmonica more frequently, finding solace in music when words fail. Bennett and Wilson have developed an unspoken coordination, each anticipating the other's movements during skirmish deployments. And you feel the weight of sergeant's stripes on your sleeve, not just the physical fabric, but the responsibility they represent for lives entrusted to your leadership. These incremental adaptations, multiplied across thousands of men in hundreds of regiments, form the true story of the Civil War soldier's experience. Not just the dramatic moments of charge and countercharge, victory and defeat, but the daily endurance of hardship, the formation of bonds that transcend civilian understanding, the gradual transformation from citizen to soldier, and for the fortunate, eventually back to citizen again. As the regiment forms up for the day's march, you take your position at the head of your squad, checking equipment and alignment with practiced efficiency. The road stretches ahead, leading toward whatever engagement or encampment the day will bring. Behind lies yesterday's crossroads, one small point on a map of conflict that spans a continent. And somewhere beyond the horizon waits home, a place both unchanging and irrevocably altered by your absence, just as you have been changed by experiences that those who remained behind can never fully comprehend. The drums begin their cadence and the column lurches into motion. Left foot, right foot, the eternal rhythm of the infantry marking time toward an end that remains beyond sight but must eventually arrive. Until then, there is only the next step, the next mile, the next day of a Civil War soldier's life, endured with grim determination, occasional humor, rare moments of beauty, and the sustaining knowledge that you do not walk alone. And perhaps that, in the end, is what defines the Civil War soldier's experience most essentially. Not the politics that divided a nation, not the strategies that generals plotted on maps, not even the courage displayed in desperate moments of combat. Rather, it is the discovery that human connection persists even in war's inhumanity, that brotherhood can be found amid brutality, that moments of grace appear in the most graceless circumstances. Left foot, right foot. The march continues, carrying you and thousands like you through history's bloodiest chapter on American soil. Some will fall along the way, their journey ended by bullet or disease. Others will return home forever changed, carrying memories that shape their remaining days. All are united by having lived the answer to the question, what was it like to be a Civil War soldier? It was hardship and camaraderie, boredom and terror, mundane routine and extraordinary sacrifice. It was feet blistered from endless marching and hands calloused from digging countless rifle pits. It was the taste of hardtack softened in coffee and the smell of gunpowder that lingered in uniforms for days after battle. It was letters from home read by firelight and final messages dictated to strangers in field hospitals. It was everything human experience encompasses, compressed and intensified by the proximity of death and the forge of shared adversity. As the regiment disappears around a bend in the road, the dust of its passing settling on empty fields, we leave our unnamed sergeant and his squad to continue their journey. Their war will eventually end, as all wars must. Some will survive to tell their stories. Others will become names carved on stones or fading entries in regimental logs. But in this moment, they march together under the summer sun, their individual fates still unwritten, their collective experience forming one small thread in the complex tapestry of a nation's most defining conflict. The road stretches onward and the soldiers follow step by step into history. When we consider the Civil War today, we often focus on the grand movements of armies, the political machinations of leaders, or the social transformations that followed emancipation. These perspectives are valid and important. But to truly understand this pivotal chapter in American history, we must also remember the individual men who lived it day by day, not as historical figures, but as human beings who ate and slept, laughed and wept, feared and hoped, and ultimately shaped a nation's destiny through their collective endurance. Their legacy lives on not just in monuments and textbooks, but in the very fabric of American identity, a reminder that our nation was tested by fire and, though scarred, emerged intact through the courage and sacrifice of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps you might spare a thought for those long-ago soldiers, blue and grey alike, who once lay beneath the same stars that now shine over your home, their dreams not so different from your own despite the vast distance of time and experience that separates you from them. In remembering them, we honour not just their service but our shared humanity, the enduring connection that binds us across generations to those who came before and those who will follow, all of us participants in the continuing story of a nation still striving to fulfil its promise of freedom and justice for all.